Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 27, 2021, and we are at the Transportation Commission meeting, and we are joined here virtually. My name is Bridget Obikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission Coordinator. This meeting is being recorded, so please turn off your mics when you are not speaking. And with that, before we start with the agenda items, are there any citizen comments for matters that are not on the agenda? Okay, so since we don't have any items, any citizen comments that are not on the agenda, I will turn it over to Chairman Slatt. Thank you. The first agenda item we'll be presenting on, though, I must say, excuse me, is the county manager's proposal for the capital improvement plan for transportation issues. And we will be hearing from Sarah Crawford, our Assistant Director, and Dennis Leach is joined here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. My name is Sarah Crawford, as Bridget mentioned, and I'll be providing a brief overview presentation of the transportation component of the county manager's proposed FY 2022 and 2024 capital improvement plan. I will try to keep this brief. However, as I'm sure you've seen, there is a lot packed into the capital improvement plan. So with that, I'll just take it away. So there's several highlights. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Let me try sharing again. Hold on a second. I'm having some issues with my sharing here. Bridget, you can see my screen, right? It's just a matter of going into full presentation mode.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, whoops. And as I'm clicking around trying to do that, you can still see my screen?
Yes, you're
excellent.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, so let's try this again, because I think I had it. Apologies, everyone. Okay, we're back. So some highlights and takeaways from this year's 3-year CIP. We spent some time this past summer working intensively within staff, and I'll give credit to our Transportation Capital Fund Manager, Vijaytha Huffman, for leading us on an exercise of understanding how our capital program has performed related to past capital improvement plans, i.e. how good were we at hitting our implementation targets related to what funding we had programmed for those projects. And so what we've learned is that even with our best efforts, there's externalities that I'll get into on the subsequent slides that have led to the ability to add more projects into the capital improvement plan with the same amount of funding, because we anticipate, based on past performance, that we'll have a lag in implementation for a variety of reasons, despite our best efforts. And so this new CIP, or the proposed CIP, incorporates additional projects into the program, which is exciting for a variety of reasons. However, with new projects comes increased workload, more engagement, and additional work with our internal and external partners. We have put in a request for 7 additional full-time staff to help us implement this accelerated capital improvement program. We're also looking at identifying several additional delivery mechanisms that will enhance partnerships with third parties. We've done this before on the Lynn Street Esplanade with Vdot, and we are currently working with Vdot and their delivery of the Boundary Channel Interchange project. We are also pursuing such arrangements for Crystal City Metro Station East Entrance, the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail, and for a variety of projects in the Rosslyn-Boston corridor. So some of our partners, I've mentioned Vdot, Eastern Federal Lands Highway, a division of the Federal Highway Administration, is also a partner, as well as our numerous private developers within the county. I should note, though, that this doesn't necessarily accelerate individual projects. We'll still conduct robust engagement through our 6-step engagement process, and we'll have to continue working to negotiate easements to consensus, and also handle project oversight as well. Another highlight of this CIP is that we continue to leverage external funding sources, and you'll hear a little bit about that in subsequent items on your agenda. Finally, we have limited use of PAYGO and bond funds, and it's really strictly limited to state of good repair, and I'll highlight some of those programs as well. So this graphic gets into a little bit of how we've identified ways that we can enhance implementation of the program. We've used our own staff and contractors today, and we have partnered in a limited manner with third parties. As you can see, we have a lot of funding going into the program, and because of that, and because of some of the ways that our program's been hampered in the past with extended time taken to acquire right-of-way, with coordination with utilities that takes longer than anticipated, we have additional funding in our previously approved funding that we're hoping to advance additional projects and work with those third parties to develop. And additionally, as I mentioned before, we'll need internal staff to be able to advance this implementation. So what this does then, in looking at the proposed CIP, and I won't get into a lot of detail on this slide since this is online in the document, and I believe the slide deck will be posted following the meeting. You can see here the major program components of our 3-year CIP, and if you'll notice down towards the bottom, I think you can see my cursor here, there's a line item for an implementation adjustment. What we've done based on past experience through our variance analysis is reduced the cost of projects in the 3-year CIP by 20%, which allows us to balance based on funding. And it assumes that we will then implement based on past progress. We also obviously have continuing infusion of revenue into the CIP on an annual basis. The main dedicated transportation fund sources that come into our CIP are the commercial and industrial tax and MBTA local, which are 2 components of the Transportation Capital Fund, as well as the tax increment finance district in Crystal City, Pentagon City, and Potomac Yard. I will note we don't have trends on here, but due to the pandemic, CNI is lagging based on past revenue projections, not by much, but a little. MBTA has actually been rarely flat. It's based predominantly on the regional sales tax, and TIF has been lagging based on, or compared with, I guess I should say, previous revenue projections. I'll just highlight some of the sources of funds. This is very similar to past CIPs. As I mentioned, we have a large amount of previously approved or existing funds that we intend to expend over the 3-year period. The CIP comprises 48% of new funding, and about almost the same percentage, roughly 50% of that new funding is external sources, or regional, state, and federal grants that we apply for on a competitive basis. And some of those we you'll be again hearing more about later on in this meeting and later throughout the year. This is a big grant application year. So I'll just highlight some changes that build upon some of the information that I've already shared in this presentation. We've added moved up, which means we'll implement at an earlier date, or expanded some projects and programs due to this new strategy. We've moved up the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail in coordination with Eastern Federal Lands Highway. And we've added back in 2 projects that are asterisked: the Arlington Boulevard Trail and streetscape improvements along North Sycamore Street adjacent to the East Falls Church Metro Rail Station. We've also added intersection improvements at West Glebe, South Glebe Interchange, which is very close to the West Glebe Road Bridge over 4 Mile Run, which is a capital project in our program. We recognized some safety concerns at this intersection and felt that we needed to advance this implementation sooner. Similarly, there's a lot going on around 4 Mile Run Drive and Shirlington Road with our Shirlington Road Bridge project, the implementation of the Jenny Dean Park project. And so we've included funding not only for a study of connectivity of the W&OD trail in this location, but also looking at future potential capital projects that improve streetscape and accessibility along Shirlington Road and 4 Mile Run Drive in this area. We've also added funding to the Neighborhood Complete Streets program, which will allow us to accelerate some projects. The Capital Bike Share program has been expanded, which includes additional e-bikes in service. And we've also added the courthouse second, or we've advanced, I guess I should say, or moved up the courthouse second elevator project. And we'll be helping WMATA with the Army Navy Drive Transit Center in Pentagon City. This is not a project that we're funding, but this is a project that we'll be providing staff support to as WMATA implements that project. And finally, as I know all of you must be excited and interested about based on the Vision Zero Action Plan adoption earlier this month by the County Board, more funding was put into the street safety improvements portfolio to allow for more rapid deployment of some of the strategies identified in Vision Zero. So this slide, with this slide and then the subsequent slides, we'll get into greater detail on some of the programs within the CIP as well as specific projects. As many of you may know, the Transportation CIP is composed of programs of projects. We have about, I can just speak quite in a detailed manner on the complete street side, but there's about 50 complete streets capital projects. There's a numerous amount of transportation operations capital projects, and of course our transit portfolio has a number of really significant projects, as you can see on this slide. So this slide highlights the real big projects that are advancing into construction or continuing design and then advancing into construction, for the CC to DCA NEPA study in the NEPA process. As I'd mentioned before, I guess I alluded to before, we do have some pressures in implementing our program. The county has a practice of negotiating easements by consensus with property owners, and sometimes this takes a while to make sure that everything's worked out to satisfaction. And we also coordinate with a number of utilities above and below our right-of-way in implementing projects. And of course, they have their own projects and timelines, and ensuring coordination often takes time. So diving into the portfolio of the transportation program, we'll start with the Bike Arlington program. There's a total of $12.7 million across the 3 years of the CIP that will allow 3 projects to advance into construction. They're listed here. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through everything, but we can certainly take questions afterwards. Similarly, we will be advancing 3 additional projects in concept development. I will note here, though, the Custis Trail renovation expansion may be new to many of you, although it's been kind of it's been in our CIP for quite a while, and it's marching now closer to the front. This is something that we can work with our partners at MVTC through the Commuter Choice Program, the I-66 Commuter Choice Program, to potentially fund and improve bike accessibility parallel to I-66. Many of you are familiar with the Columbia Pike Streets Program as well as the Columbia Pike Transit Stations Program. These 2 initiatives combined have $106 million in this 3-year CIP, and that will allow us to continue delivery of the segments along Columbia Pike. We've completed 3 segments. H&I, the 4th, is substantially complete, and we are advancing segments A and F for ITB. we're putting them out to bid for contracts later this calendar year, early next calendar year, followed shortly by C and D. They're in the later stages of design. The Columbia Pike Transit Stations, there are 8 stations that are under development now in coordination with the Columbia Pike Multimodal project. The remaining stations will be coordinated with those remaining segments of the multimodal program. There's also the completion of the parallel bike boulevards, and under construction now is the 4-mile run bridge over Columbia Pike. Next up is the Crystal City, Pentagon City, Potomac Yard Streets portfolio, which totals roughly $63 million in this 3-year CIP, with the delivery of many projects that you all have been active in improving with us over design over the past several years, and we'll see those come to fruition. There's a whole host of projects moving towards construction in this area of the county, and then many that are going to be under development and in design, including one that we're excited about is the extension of the Army Navy Drive protected bike lanes west of Pentagon City, as well as we'll be beginning the environmental impact statement portion of the NEPA study this summer with an engagement to solicit input on the purpose and need of this important transportation connection. There's a program in our CIP called Improvements Outside Major Corridors. This is essentially a very large program of modest-sized projects that improve improve arterials throughout the county. We're upwards of almost $20 million in this 3-year CIP, with the number of projects that are currently under construction, including the intersection of Lee Highway or Route 29 and Glebe Road, as well as a number of other projects along many of our arterials. In some of those projects that I'd mentioned earlier on, those that we were able to advance more expeditiously given our implementation strategy. I'd like to highlight 2 projects towards the bottom of the slide. The Arlington Boulevard, Washington Boulevard Interchange project is a project that we received some funding to improve the safety at this location. As many of you may be aware, the interchange structure at this interchange is really yields one of the higher crash locations in the county. So we're coming up with some concepts to address this. While the Army-Navy Country Club Trail is not in this portfolio, I felt it was appropriate to add it to this to just note that we will begin engagement on a variety of feasibility options that we looked at over the last couple of years. Engagement was delayed due to COVID and being able to keep the pipeline moving. The Rosslyn-Ballston Arterial Street Improvements Program contains a range of complete streets projects from, in this case, roughly Virginia Square to Rosslyn. Many of these projects are those that you all have participated with us in design. We are planning to advance concept design on the Fort Myer Drive Tunnel removal and 2-way conversion. This is a mammoth of a project in Rosslyn that will really reshape the road infrastructure and transportation network. While this is a discrete project at a discrete location, there's about 4 or 5 capital projects that must precede this, as well as a couple that must follow it in order for the network to be functional. So we're beginning looking at design and concepts to understand sequencing of the various projects for this transformation. I will shift now to the portfolio of transportation operations projects that are included in the capital program. This really is the heart of maintaining and improving the infrastructure that we have that's in the roadway and in the right-of-way that all of us use probably on a daily basis when we're out and about. This portfolio totals almost $50 million and is comprised of a number of technology systems that improve our ability to monitor and then make changes to the network to improve traffic flow for all modes, not just for cars, but ensuring that pedestrians have ample crossing times at intersections as well, for example. And those are accomplished through our ITS program and our SNAP program. We also have 2 programs in the CIP that repair, replace, and improve parking meters, and then look at new technology, such as our performance parking pilot, where we're partnering with Vdot to improve ways where we can communicate parking information to users ahead of time, which will ideally reduce people kind of milling in the right-of-way looking for parking. We have our street lighting program, which upgrades and repairs and replaces our streetlights throughout the county. Of course, many of you probably already know, we do not own all of the streetlights in the county. Some are owned by Dominion and some are owned by the county. The street safety improvements, I feel like this should have stars and highlights around it. This is really the home of where the Vision Zero tactical improvements will come from. This is where the team within transportation engineering and options will look at crash data, will look at a variety of different safety metrics, and identify locations where they can pilot new technology or new types of improvements in our right-of-way. And as we then, they work together with our capital projects team, some formal capital projects will grow out of the street safety improvements program and wind up in one of the programs that we just reviewed in previous CIPs. And finally, we have a whole host of assets in the right-of-way that we maintain and improve and add on to. All of the signage that you see in the right-of-way is an asset that we track. Similarly, our transportation signals and all of the equipment that's associated with those, we continually obviously maintain, but we improve upon as well by adding backup power systems and CCTV, which allow us to monitor the intersections for performance. And last but certainly not least, at almost $320 million in this 3-year CIP, is our massive transit program. Our transit staff is monitoring, designing, and implementing a series of really huge and what will be transformative transit projects throughout the county. Under construction now is the Ballston Multimodal Center at the Ballston Metro Rail station, which will improve bus to rail connectivity in Ballston. And as many of you know, there's a number of different buses, local and regional, that provide transfers at the Ballston Metro Rail station. We've also talked before about a variety of Metro Rail station improvements that we are coordinating with WMATA on, and that's the Crystal City Metro Rail East entrance. That is going through design and will be in construction within this 3-year CIP period. We also have the Ballston Metro Rail Station West entrance, which is in design and will be moving into greater levels of design during this time period. And I think it just misses being included in the construction in this 3-year period, but construction is anticipated to follow shortly outside of the CIP period. Similarly, we're really excited to begin construction on the art operations and maintenance facility, which will allow us to ground and operate the art fleet wholly within Arlington. There's some improvements to transit in Pentagon City, and I apologize, I'm jumping all over the place, but the Pentagon City area with the addition of the Pentagon City second elevator, as well as the Transitway extension to Pentagon City, which will be in construction in the next several years. And in design and coordination with Alexandria is the Transitway extension to Potomac Yard, which will create a full transitway within Arlington County. I'd also like to touch on some of those state of good repair projects and programs that I mentioned earlier. I won't highlight all of them, but I thought it important to highlight 2 of the big programs and the big users of bond funding in particular in our portfolio, and that's our paving program. As many of you may know, over the years, Arlington County has invested a lot of funding and time and energy into improving the pavement condition index. That's what PCI stands for. And with a new metric and a review of roads in Arlington, we are now at a PCI of over 80, which is just above our goal. So we're feeling really good about that, and we can shift to a position that's more of a maintain versus a catch up. And well, I should note, and I'm sure some of you may be thinking, well, my street certainly isn't anywhere near an 80. We do use that index and what we find when we monitor the streets to inform the next year's paving program. So this calendar year 2021 paving program will repave the worst streets in the county, those that are around a PCI of 50 and some that go into 60. And that's the intent with every subsequent paving program, is to really ensure that we are addressing those streets that have a poor PCI. Our bridge investments program is also significant. It includes bridge maintenance and bridge renovation. We have undertaken a significant effort in our bridge renovation program over the past several years. We completed the complete rebuild of the Carlin Springs Bridge over George Mason Drive a couple of years ago, and we will be completely reconstructing the West Glebe Road Bridge over 4 Mile Run and the Arlington Ridge Road, Mount Vernon Road Bridge over 4 Mile Run. One of the things that we developed along the way is something called a bridge condition rating, which is something that is akin to a pavement condition rating, which allows us to monitor our bridges. And the graphs that you see on this slide show kind of where we want to be. Our goal with this rating is to be between a 6 and a 7. And the Carlin Springs Road Bridge, that renovation pushed us into that sort of window. But the other 2 bridges that we'll be reconstructing over the next several years will put us in a pretty good spot there. And as you can see on the lower graph, the bridge element ratings takes the poorest rating in the bridge of each bridge in our inventory and puts that on a scale. And nationally, Arlington's doing pretty well, but by 2024, with that replacement of Arlington Ridge Road, we should have that rating be 0, which is really good. That's a good thing to be 0 at. And so just as I'm wrapping up, I wanted to review some of the projects that are going under construction in this fiscal year coming up. Many of these already are under construction. Construction will continue. And for some of these, there will be additional construction to witness as we move forward into that fiscal year. I'd also like to highlight some of the accomplishments that the team working with the public and our partners have delivered over the past year or so. We're really excited about the improvements at Clarendon Circle. It makes this pretty big crossing safer and easier and more clear for bicyclists and pedestrians and motorists alike. Similarly, we added trail capacity to the Custis Trail at the Rosslyn Esplanade, along with some really nice sidewalk and streetscape infrastructure. As I mentioned before, we're substantively complete on Columbia Pike West End and really increased the sidewalk width for pedestrians along Columbia Pike. And as many of you know, we removed that elevated portion of Clark Bell and Crystal City. So there's some things that we are considering for the future as we think towards the next CIP. We do have the Transit Strategic Plan, which was previously called the Transit Development Plan. That's up to be updated in 2023 and must be completed by 2024. That's a state requirement in order for us to be qualified to receive state transit funding. As many of you are aware, the board approved the bike element, sub-element of the Master Transportation Plan 2 years ago, and that makes it the most recent sub-element. At this point, the various sub-elements of the MTP range from 2 to 14 years old and really aren't in keeping with industry standard anymore. And as many of you may be aware, there are some inconsistencies between some of the sub-elements. And so our goal over the next, I think, 2 to 5 years is to take a comprehensive view at how we plan for transportation in Arlington and how we look at how our transportation network is responsive to environmental sustainability, economic development, safety, equity, and of course, in any update of our policy document, we would include the various action plans that have been adopted and then soon to be adopted in the Vision Zero Action Plan and the biophilic. For those who might not know, Arlington joined the biophilic network, and we are currently working with the Department of Parks and Recreation as a lead to identify principles and measures that we could then incorporate into our policy in the MTP. And so where does that leave us with project prioritization and selection in the interim? We're developing an internal tool based on the MTP policies to allow us to add these new projects, some of which we've discussed today. But what we really need is to use this MTP process to understand the priorities and use those policy guides that would be adopted by the board to allow us to create a prioritization process that's predictable and that's understandable by all who would have contributed to an MTP to allow us to identify that process for multimodal capital investment. Another thing that we're considering, which really impacts the entire network locally and regionally, is what will post-pandemic travel patterns look like. Many office workers have teleworked over the past year and a half. Will that continue? Will people select different modes? And so we're working closely with our local and regional partners to try to understand how we all collectively plan, and particularly how we get people back on transit. The county makes a huge investment in WMATA and Metro Rail every year, and we really need to turn to the point where we're getting people back on local and regional buses and transit, because as you all know, that is really the backbone to a successful transportation network in Arlington. One thing I will note is that the transportation work session with the county board is scheduled on June 22nd in the afternoon, and the board will adopt, well, I hope they will adopt a capital improvement program or plan for us to then implement at their July board meeting. With that, I am happy to turn it back to the chair and receive any questions that you all may have.
Great, thank you very much. For some reason, my Teams buttons moved when you stopped sharing your screen. I had trouble muting myself. All right, commissioners, if you have questions, I know that was a lot to digest and a lot to think through. Go ahead and throw your hands up. In the meantime, I know I have a couple that you answered like at least half of the questions that I submitted in advance, so thank you very much. But I definitely had a couple that I was still wondering on the answers for. I think the first one is the Transitway extension to Potomac Ave, Alexandria. Two questions about that. One is the kind of project description about adding 2 additional southbound lanes doesn't seem to line up with what Alexandria seems to be planning for the Transitway on Potomac Avenue. So I was wondering about that. And then the other one is what the source of funding is for that, because it was just listed as other in the draft CIP.
Sure, I can answer both of those questions, and thank you in advance because I was able to connect with our transit staff to make sure that we had some answers prepared. So the project description is a holdover from the last CIP, realizing that Alexandria is currently working with the development community there to understand how it will align its portion of the transitway. So we're in conversations with Alexandria, and at this point the discussion is fluid until we understand precisely where they're going to end up and how we can align with that. So I'm hoping by the next CIP, which will be this time next year, we'll have a better description, and that other funding is previously awarded DRPT capital funding to the tune of $6.6 million.
Great, thank you very much. And then I think my next question is, there used to be a Safe Routes to School capital program in prior CIPs, which appears to have been sunsetted. How are we planning to pay for identified safety needs near schools going forward with that program going away?
So we work closely with APS when we are developing capital projects. This also relates to the work that they do in schools, and we work, again, in collaboration. We house those projects that were previously included in the Safe Routes to School element within either Walk Arlington or the improvements outside major corridors. When that federal program ceased to be a standalone federal program, it didn't really make sense for us to have that as a standalone element. And so that's kind of where those projects migrated. It wasn't just we said, okay, we're not doing, Safe Routes to School anymore. It's just they're in different areas of the CIP. I feel like you had another answer or another question that I didn't quite get at within that answer. Or did I cover yours?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay.
That one was straightforward and not a 3-part question like most of mine. Awesome. Next up, I would love to know the state of transit signal priority in the county. Looking back at the last 10-year adopted CIP, we were supposed to have a transit signal priority implementation plan done by FY 2019, and to have deployed transit signal priority on Lee Highway, Glebe Road, Crystal City, Pentagon City Corridor, and Washington Boulevard, all by the end of fiscal year 2022. And I don't think we have transit signal priority anywhere in the county at this point.
That's right. I can start an answer, and if Dennis Leach, our director, would like to add on, I welcome his input. We have recently kicked off a TSP study with a contractor, and it is funded through the Transit ITS program. It builds on work that was previously done, and the study will really dig in and determine the feasibility and the degree to which TSP can be implemented on those corridors that you listed.
All right, thank you. I'm going to jump to some other commissioners now because I've got hands up. Commissioner Lantelmi, you're up first.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a good presentation. I have questions about Washington Boulevard. First, I think it's great to add those 2 projects into the priorities. Pershing Drive one, I saw you restripe there, which sort of, I guess, gives a bit of a preview of where you're going to go with that, which is great. Also, of course, the widening or the reconfiguring between Kirkwood and Fairfax. What portion of Washington Boulevard is Vdot and what portion is us? Or are we now responsible for the entire road throughout the county, Washington Boulevard?
Okay, this is going to test my knowledge. We are responsible for the. Hold on, Dennis, you might have to jump in because my mind is going to blank on this.
Basically, it is divided responsibility. So Washington Boulevard, west of Glebe Road to East Falls Church is Vdot. Washington Boulevard from Glebe Road east through Ballston, Virginia Square, Clarendon, down to the Arlington Boulevard interchange is Arlington. Washington Boulevard from the interchange south to 395 is Vdot.
Okay, great. That's sort of what I was figuring. Thanks for confirming that. Yeah, I would very much like us to be thinking about that section between Glebe and Kirkwood. That recently came up with a small project that was being done at Vermont. It's just very inadequate for pedestrians. It's bad for it's impossible for bicycles. It's very narrow. It tends to be high speed. It goes by a number of public facilities. I think it desperately needs a full rethinking. And given that we control it, that's wonderful news. The way we did Wilson Boulevard, I think it could stand to do that, because the piecemeal fixing of the sidewalks, which did come up in that Vermont Street project, it'll take decades if it ever gets done. Like I said, it really needs to be rethought, and I encourage you to put that somewhere on your radar to do a holistic look of that entire corridor there.
Great. Thank you for that input. I will say we have made several pedestrian safety improvements. We put enhanced crosswalks and RFBs at Nelson and at one other location I'm drawing a blank on right now. I think it was Utah Street. And we also, as a standard practice, when we rebuild traffic signals, we now incorporate pedestrian safety measures and transit safety measures at every single rebuild. So when we rebuilt the signals in that corridor, we're putting in nubs, rebuilding the ADA ramps as a matter of standard practice with maintenance.
And all of those are great because we do need them, but I'm saying go beyond that. Because those are more spot improvements. Again, they're great to do, but there has to be something more. It's a very, very narrow right-of-way there. There's no prospect of us getting a wider right-of-way all the way through that corridor because it's all small plots, small lots all the way through there. We really need to rethink it. Right now it's 4 lanes, no turn lanes, no parking, or virtually no parking. That needs to be rethought to widen those sidewalks. Effectively, we need to drop a lane. Maybe add a turn lane in the middle, the way we did Wilson Boulevard at its western end. It shouldn't be a main thoroughfare because we have wider roads paralleling it in both north and south of it. I really think we should seriously be studying having it down to 1 lane in each direction, a turn lane in the middle, widening the sidewalks, and maybe adding protected bike lanes with that, that one disused lane. Because with the utility poles, the narrow sidewalks, the property lines, we can't do anything else with it. It's these spot improvements which just are not adequate for what that neighborhood needs. Anyway, like I said, it's an editorial comment, but I encourage you to really be rethinking that whole Kirkwood to Glebe. Thanks. I'll get off now.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. And then just a reminder to commissioners that there are 10 items on our agenda tonight, 4 of which are action items. As you are thinking about just how much detail is necessary in a question or response. Commissioner Buck, you're up next.
Okay. Thank you for coming, Ms. Crawford. I'm really excited about sort of the public project prioritization process. Very excited about a redoing of the MTP. I think one of my concerns is sort of at the middle level of planning. A lot of the projects, they sort of get queued up off of sector plans or PDSs. It's great that they'll then be prioritized. It's great that they'll vet it up against a master transportation plan. I'm wondering about where in the CIP we find sort of the middle ground of transportation planning. So Arlington Boulevard is a good example where we have a lot of issues identified. We have now 2, maybe 3 active projects within county boundaries on that corridor. but we don't have a comprehensive transportation plan for the corridor. I'm wondering where in the CIP we find that, and if not, is there, do you anticipate through this MTP process to try and sort of create some capacity for that?
So I might answer that backwards from the way that you've outlined it. We've not typically used transportation capital funding to fund planning. But given the state of what our fund sources are and availability, and given what we're able to do with transportation funds by the state code, we feel this would be a valuable use of a limited amount of capital funding to put towards planning. And so through that MTP update, when that occurs, our hope is that it will identify key corridors that demand further intensive study, and that assuming that that planning and that additional study would yield capital improvements, we would be able to access our transportation capital funding to help us support funding those additional studies. But I think at this point, our goal is to try to update our policies and understand, based on that prioritization, where we can and should direct this capital funding for planning in the future.
All right, great. Commissioner Yeri, your hand's up next.
Yep, and just for the sake of brevity, Mr. Chair, I will say that just to use my temporary soapbox here, I would like to second everything Mr. Lintelmy said about Washington Boulevard from Glebe to Kirkwood, because I live here, right in that neighborhood, and making that street is also important to me too. Better is important to me too, so thank you.
Oh, wow, that was quick. All right. I think two more questions from me. The first is there anywhere in this CIP equipment for automated enforcement, like automated speed enforcement or smart signals or any of that sort of equipment in the CIP?
So I checked with our signals team, and there's neither the automated enforcement equipment or smart signals included in the systems and signals or ITS CIP programs. However, they are undertaking several initiatives through that ITS CIP program that range from improving communications to field devices, connected vehicle infrastructure, automated traffic signal performance metrics, and improved data management. And so these are in the early stages of pilots and testing, and we don't know yet what any additional logistical hurdles could be for future implementation. But just to give you a sense, we are testing some new technologies through pilots.
And then in that same ITS question, there is like $10 million in regional money under the ITS program. Can you speak to what that regional grant was for?
Sure. We applied for and received funding from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for a suite of projects that would implement ITS along Washington Boulevard, in several places along Columbia Pike, and then a few locations in Crystal City. And to just put that to real life, the signal infrastructure that's being incorporated at Washington Boulevard and Pershing Drive is being funded through that source of funds.
Gotcha. All right. Commissioner Yeri, is your hand back up, or did it not come down from last time?
It did not come down, sorry. Yep.
There we go. Commissioner Brose, go ahead.
Yeah, just a short plaudit for the work that was done on the Clarendon intersection. I think it's really quite improved, and as one who uses it both biking and driving and walking, just kudos for a real nice change. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, seeing no other hands up, I just want to say thank you for a fantastic presentation, for addressing so many of the questions that I submitted in advance, and just say that there are a whole bunch of projects in the works right now that I'm extremely excited about, including Army-Navy Drive Complete Streets and Boundary Channel, that I'm extremely looking forward to, and I hope we can make sure we've got some projects in this CIP that 3 years from now me will be equally looking forward to seeing hit construction. And seeing no other hands raised, I think we can let you go with many thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and with that, next on the agenda, we have the Vdot Revenue Sharing and Transportation Alternatives with Richard Roisman and Dan Moloff.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. So, as she said, I'm here for a preliminary briefing on 2 grant opportunities, the Transportation Alternatives Program and Vdot Revenue Sharing. If you've been on the TC for a few years, these may be familiar programs to you. I'll try to run through them quickly. Before I jump in, this is just a reminder that this is not an action item tonight. We'll come back to you later this year for a formal endorsement on these projects. Right now, we're just sharing our initial thoughts on likely candidates for these 2 programs. So let's take them one by one real quick. We'll start with the Transportation Alternatives Program. These are federal funds managed by Vdot and the Transportation Planning Board. The fact that they're federal funds does mean that projects that are funded through transportation alternatives are federalized, which adds cost and time to them. That is a factor in project selection. Specifically, the TAP program is for non-automobile-based projects. It's really ideal for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. That's usually what we use it for. We often use it for trail projects, things like that. Awards can be up to $1 million per project per year, or $2 million over the lifetime of a project. We rarely actually get that much. These funds are in very high demand. The sweet spot tends to be around $500,000 per award, and we tend to get about 1 per cycle. The awards are discretionary, meaning Vdot and the TPB can basically just pick the projects that they like from the pot of eligible submissions. Mandatory pre-applications are due July 1st. Final applications are due October 1st. So you'll be hearing from us prior to October, certainly. This submission will cover FY 23 and 24. They do this 2 years at a time. So our current thinking on this program is that in this cycle we would apply for probably only 1 project, which we are thinking would be about a $500,000 application for the Arlington Boulevard Trail Phase 2. It was actually in Ms. Crawford's presentation just a minute ago. So this is the phase, I believe, between Fort Myer Drive and Scott Street. The reason this is a good project, it's a trail expansion project. I'm not going to tell you too much about the project in particular. I'm really here for the grant. Unfortunately, we usually would apply for maybe a couple projects on this. This cycle, this is kind of the only good prospect that we have, just given the amount of funding that's likely to be available, given the undesirability of federalizing some of our projects. If you federalize a project, it costs a couple $100,000 to do that. And if your project is only a couple $100,000 to begin with, it really doesn't make sense. And then, what's sort of ready to go given the timelines provided, right? We need projects that are in the the sweet spot between enough planning has been done, but they're not yet funded. Where are they? So, add up all those things, and this is just kind of the only project that there is. So we want to apply for it. By next cycle, we do think there will be some additional projects that are at the right stage of planning to be viable for application. But as of now, pretty much everything else that are on our books is either funded or not advanced enough or undesirable. So for TAP, I'm bearing in mind everyone's time. I'm trying to be fast. That's what we're thinking right now. And then I'll just move on to talking about revenue sharing, unless you'd like to take questions about TAP now. It's kind of up to you.
Let's do them all together and take questions at the end.
All right, let's move on to revenue sharing. So Vdot Revenue Sharing Program provides a 50-50 dollar for dollar match for road projects, right? That's important. Transit is not eligible for this program. Bike projects, if they're on street, can technically be eligible, but they're not really a good match for the program. Vdot can kind of pick what they choose. Really what Vdot pushes for this program are, new streets, bridges, intersection changes, things of that nature. And despite the fact that we have a very multimodal focused program, we do have street projects. And so indeed, we often use this revenue source to fund things like bridge repair, deck rehabilitations. We have a lot of those. This particular, before I tell you this particular cycle, a little bit more background. Awards can be up to $5 million per project per year, up to $10 million per locality. Mandatory pre-applications July 1st, applications due October 1st. So a very, the same cycle as TAP. We'll come back probably at the same meeting with the final applications. These are covering FY27 through 28, so it's quite a bit further out than TAP. Bear that in mind as you listen to the project. So current thinking, again, this is kind of unusual that in both these programs we're only thinking of applying for one project, but we are only thinking of applying for one project for a different reason. The project is the Fort Myer Drive tunnel removal. This is in Rosslyn where there's grade separation. We'd like to, level it out. Basically the reason why that's a loaner project is it's a $10 million request on its own. If we apply for it, we basically can't apply for anything else. We hit our maximum ceiling, and this is just a project that is big enough that happens. We do think it's a really important project. Unlike a lot of the other sort of core of Rosslyn projects that might be better fits for other funding sources, this is a really good fit for this funding source. And given that FY27-28 timeframe, now is the sweet spot to apply for that, basically. So, bearing in mind we don't want to make our own projects ineligible or, compete against what is a difficult project to fund and a very high priority for us, we're currently thinking that would be our only submission this cycle. That's pretty much what I have to tell you. I would be very happy to take any questions that you have.
Great, thank you very much. Gotta say, I think the revenue sharing project is an extremely great fit, and I think really hard to go wrong with that one in particular. I know. I wish it were happening earlier than FY27-28, but there's a lot of planning, I'm sure, that has to happen before we're to construction on that. Commissioner Bruno, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. An excellent update. Just a quick question on the Vdot revenue sharing, the Fort Myer Drive tunnel proposal. It's the only one that we're applying for. I agree it is a great fit. And this may be an impossible question to answer, but how likely is it that Arlington gets awarded that? Are we putting all our eggs in one basket kind of thing?
That is a great question. I don't know whether they would give us all the funding or not. I think it's pretty likely that it would get some funding. And at this point, that actually does help us a lot, because the way that Vdot prioritizes revenue sharing projects is if you have a project that is in their hopper and has gotten funding but needs more, they will prioritize that first in a subsequent year. So if we can get this one in the door, even if they select to only partially fund it, it would make it exponentially easier to then fund on the next cycle. So, I think the odds that we would get some funding at least are pretty high. I'd be really surprised if we didn't get anything. Whether we would get the complete $10 million request, it's not outside the realm of the possible, but I have to say I would be a little surprised if we did.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck, go ahead.
You may be muted. I can't hear you.
Okay, now you're definitely muted, Commissioner. Now, try speaking again.
Go ahead and skip me.
No, I can hear you now.
Okay. So about the revenue sharing, I was just wondering, in general, are there any merit criteria to it, like similar to Smart Scale, or is it pretty much you just sort of provide a description of your conceptual design and a little bit background, and they just sort of pick and choose?
Yeah, they do have some selection criteria. As I just said, projects that are in the hopper already are funded sooner. I could pull up that list if you want me to.
Please don't bother. But this is more a personal curiosity question than.
Sure. They're logistical, though. They're not really like, trip based the way that Smart Scale is yet. Sure. There could be someday, but so far that hasn't happened.
I do wanted to jump back to transportation alternatives. I'm just a little bit surprised given, 2 years ago, we, completely rebuilt the bicycle element of the MTP with a whole giant appendix full of projects in the back of it. And we only have one trail project that we think that we could potentially submit to transportation alternatives at this point. Can you speak at all to that? Is it just that none of them have started the appropriate level of design and engineering yet, or what?
Some, without going through the list of every trail project that we have in the hopper right now, I can tell you that basically there's two broad reasons why there's not more projects on the list. One is, as you said, they're just not quite at the right stage of planning to be funded yet. But also there's frankly increasing, I should say decreasing willingness to take on federal funds for projects that are at this scale. Because of the difficulty with federalization. You have to go through additional environmental documentation. You have to go through, just a lot of additional steps that adds a lot of cost to the projects. It can double the cost of the projects if you're talking about something of on the scale that TAP could fund. So it is unfortunately getting a little bit harder than it used to be to find trail projects that are good fits for this funding source because of that. The funding source isn't really getting any bigger. The same amount of money is available through TAP that was available through TAP 10 years ago, but everything costs more, including the costs of federalization. So the window of projects that really work well for this is getting a little bit smaller every year or every 2 years.
All right, great. That's very helpful. Any other commissioners? I've not seen any other hands. And I also haven't heard anybody say anything bad about what you're talking about. So I think we feel like you're moving in the right direction, and good set of potential grant applications you got there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next up, we have the Potomac Yard Land Base C with Rob Gibson and Adam Watson.
Bridget, would you like to call the applicant team first? Here's Lauren Riley.
Yes, please.
Present for the applicant.
And the applicant, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Hi, my name is Lauren Riley. Good evening, commissioners. I'm with Walsh Colucci, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Nick Cummings. We represent the applicant for this project, ZOM. We're really excited to come before you tonight as an action item for this new development that will bring Potomac Yard closer to completion. Briefly, from a land use perspective, the property is zoned to the CO 1.5 zoning district, and it's located within the Potomac Yard Phase Development Site Plan, or PDSP, that was approved in 2000. The PDSP allocates uses and densities across the land base, with each land bay receiving its own final site plan approval. Land base C is the last remaining land bay in the Potomac Yard PDSP to be developed, and our project will focus specifically on the eastern portion of that land bay, known as Land Bay C East. For our applications, we're proposing a new final site plan on Land Bay C East for a residential development with 2 buildings, 491 units, and approximately 8,000 square feet of ground floor retail, all supported by a below-grade parking structure and in general compliance with the Potomac Yard design guidelines. This project will also deliver a portion of the North Park Plaza public park called for in the design guidelines. It's a really interesting and eye-catching design that you'll see in a moment. And we're also seeking an amendment to the PDSP and an amendment to the previously approved final site plan for Land Bay C to permit our proposed development here. And we're also proposing encroachments for the underground garage. And with that, I'll hand it off to John Gately with Bkl Architecture to give a brief overview of the design.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the design. Grady, if you don't mind sharing your screen with the presentation. I'll give you some high-level introduction to the design, and then I'll let Grady Vaughn with Wells & Associate, our transportation consultant, give you the real nuts and bolts of what we're proposing. But to locate the site first, we are looking at Land Base C East. On the left map, you can see it's located, highlighted there in red, at the north end of the Potomac Yard boundary. On the right map, you can see the site highlighted there in red as well, and the green overlay represents, as Lauren mentioned, an extension or partial extension to the Central Park within that area. This is a site plan showing the kind of boundary roads around the full Land Base C site. We are only delivering the northern or the eastern portion of the site, which is planned north on this page, bounded by 29th Street to the north, Potomac Avenue on the east, and 33rd Street on the south. As Lauren mentioned, it consists of two buildings that are separated by the central passage into the Central Park that you can see there highlighted by the water feature in the center. This is an enlarged plan of what is to be delivered within our proposal. It gives you kind of a better sense of the two building shapes. They are all residential with retail at the base. You will see, as Grady will point out, that there is parking, entry, and loading bays on 29th Street on the north end of Building 1 to your left on the screen. And there are additional loading bays on the south on 33rd Street in Building 2. But in general, the design is meant to provide kind of this dynamic form on the site that engages a landscape along the street front and Central Park area that is fully activated along the ground plane. And then we'll go through a few renderings just quickly. This is a view from Potomac Avenue looking down that central passage between the two buildings. And here's an enlarged view of the same space, kind of in a raised eye level, showing that water feature that is flanked by two arcades on both sides that provide the pedestrian passage from Potomac Avenue to the Central Park. This is actually another view from the Central Park side of that central passage and that water feature. You can see here as we move through these images, we are proposing a vast amount of brick masonry on the project. And here's another view from the south along 33rd Street. This is a pedestrian passage from the Central Park, the existing Central Park, into the new Central Park space. And this is a view underneath that building coverage. Here's another view along Potomac Avenue. This is a kind of an inset within the form that pulls the building back to provide an activated space for pedestrians to reside along the retail frontage along Potomac Avenue. And then jumping back to the central space, the Central Park space, this is a lawn element that will be provided on the interior of the site. And then last view is a view from 29th Street looking at the northwest side of Building 1. This shows kind of a continuation of that park, the Central Park down the site, the center of the site, as you look back down towards 33rd. And here's an overall view from Potomac Avenue showing the kind of massing and material texture that we're looking to propose. It shows that activation along Potomac Avenue and as well the continued streetscape. And on to you, Grady.
Awesome. Thank you, John and Lauren, for the introduction. My name is Grady Vaughn. I'm with Wells and Associates. We were the traffic and transportation engineers for the project. I have a couple slides here just to run through the MMTA, the multimodal transportation assessment that we completed for the site. As Lauren mentioned, the site is proposed to be developed with 491 dwelling units and 8,246 square feet of retail. We completed a capacity analysis of the surrounding intersections for the site based on 500 dwelling units and 15,000 square feet of retail. So that gave us an extremely conservative analysis of the traffic capacity. And with the proposal, each of our study intersections operated at level of service D or better. The proposed residential uses are a decrease in traffic from the approved office uses that were originally for the site. So the capacity of the intersections has improved with our proposal compared to that. We propose a parking ratio of 0.88 parking spaces per dwelling unit with 13 spaces designated for the retail. And then further, we propose a mix of Class 1 and Class 3 bicycle parking spaces. We have 200 secure Class 1 bicycle parking spaces located throughout the building on the first floor and then the first two levels of underground garage. And we have 20 Class 3 visitor spaces located throughout the site, which I'll show you on a plan in a couple slides. The last thing to note here is our loading summary. We propose 5 loading berths, which includes 1 tandem berth, which could accommodate a larger truck if needed. This ground floor plan shows our primary bike route on Potomac Avenue, the bike lanes there, and then also our pedestrian circulation throughout the site. We have extremely wide and safe sidewalks surrounding our site on all edges and including the connection through the middle of the site that John highlighted on some of the renderings. We have 4 bike rack locations for the 20 Class 3 visitor spaces as shown with the red stars here. And also highlighted is the ground floor bike room location. Here are 2 of the Arlington County maps highlighting both the bicycle facilities on the left and then the connected grid of transit services on the right. Highlighting the bike map first, there is shown the bike lanes on Potomac Avenue, which I highlighted on the last slide as being our primary bicycle route. And then also shown are the proximate Capital Bike Share facilities. There's a double bike share with 2 stations located about 1 block north of our site at 27th Street, and then also a bike share station 1 block south. Moving over to the transit map, our best connection to transit is the Metroway stop located at the southwest corner of Lambay C, which provides a shelter and great transit facilities for our residents to use that location. The Metroway connects our site to the north metro station. Now I have a series of streetscape workups for each of our site frontages on 29th Potomac Avenue and 33rd. I'll first go through some of the facilities on these, and then I'll match that back to a rendering that John spoke to earlier so you can get a feeling for the experience. Starting with Potomac Avenue, highlighted is the existing site frontage is undeveloped, which we're improving with a minimum 6-foot wide sidewalk and 5-foot wide landscaping panel. Another thing to note is we propose to remove the curbed median and replace it with striping. This is a rendering showing the pulled back seating area that John spoke to earlier and how the landscaping panel and wide sidewalk experience would be for someone walking along our site frontage on Potomac Avenue. Next, we have the existing and proposed 29th Street. Again, our site frontage is undeveloped and we would be improving this area with a minimum 8-foot wide sidewalk, a combination of a planter and a tree pit, and then also a retail plain area to serve the retail uses adjacent to this. Our site frontage here is also where our primary combined garage access is, as well as one of the 2 loading facilities. Again, here's the rendering from before showing how our streetscape pulls you into the plaza area. as well as to the left here, it shows our proposed tree pits and sidewalk on 29th. The last streetscape here is our 33rd Street. Again, our site frontage is undeveloped, and we propose a minimum 8-foot sidewalk and 3-foot planting strip on 33rd Street. Moving to the rendering, this is the area shown with the building overhang and how our 33rd Street landscape strip and sidewalk would pull you into the plaza area on this side of the building. The last slide here is our commitment to the TMP and our participation in the TMPA, which was designed as part of the PDSP for the Potomac Yard area. Our site will designate a coordinator for our proposed buildings, and that coordinator will work with the TMPA as far as funding and monitoring of the program to achieve the goals set in the TMPA. And thank you, and I think we're happy to answer any questions that maybe anyone has.
Great. Does staff have a presentation to follow?
I do. Let me see if I can share my screen correctly, which is
I just turned mine off.
Okay. So this Potomac Yard Land Base C East project includes 3 items. It is a PDSP phase development site plan amendment for site plan 346 Potomac Yards.
Mr. Gibson, we've got your kind of like notes view, not the like full size view.
Then let's try this. How about
Much
that?
better. Excellent.
Thank you. My picture of everybody else leaves when I share the screen. So, so 3 items: the PDSP, a site plan amendment for the approved site plan for Land Base C, and a new site plan which is takes out the land area from the overall Land Base C and separates it into a site plan for Land Base C East. As you all know, the Potomac Yard plan, approved initially in 2000, includes 6 land bays: Land Bay A, B, the subject Land Bay C, D, E, and F. It includes large public open spaces in the central park here, along with additional more plaza-like elements in Land Bay C. The entire Potomac Yard Potomac Yard plan was developed with a multimodal transportation focus, providing dedicated transit facilities, including a Transitway shelter and stop located on the southwest edge of this property, and an extensive network of bike lanes along Potomac Avenue, along with new streets to support the proposed development. Here are some slides of the site's location relative to Crystal City and the county boundary, relative to our transportation master plan and the roadway classifications around the area, along with the primary bicycle corridors map, which identifies Potomac Avenue as a primary bicycle corridor. The site is well served by multimodal transportation, as we've discussed. This project will complete the last missing link of sidewalk along the western side of Potomac Avenue, which the county has supported pedestrian activities by restriping the roadway, along with other information we'll talk about further in this discussion. And the main transportation vehicle impact of the project is that the conversion from office to residential will have a net reduction in the vehicle trips generated by Potomac Yard as a whole. Some quick background on the PDSP. It was initially approved in 2000. It has been built out over the last 20 years with Land Bay D just recently coming online. Land Bay C has always previously been envisioned as a nearly 1.1 million square foot office campus with 4 office buildings on each of the corners and a new street connection, two-way street connection that goes through the 2 streets, allowing front door access to Land Bay C West, as the Transitway is the western boundary for C West. The initial project site plan was approved in 2007, and one other key element of that project was a centralized loading and vehicle access point off of Potomac Avenue, which went into the large shared underground garage. This access point will be going away as part of this development proposal. The project specifically is going to take roughly 500,000 square feet of office land use and change it to residential land use. That's the principal element of the Pdsp amendment that is before you. A quick overview of the project. Once again, it is an office conversion to residential. The 2 residential buildings will support 491 new homes. The combined garage below the 2 parcels is recommended to be parked at a minimum parking ratio of 0.7 spaces per unit. And the current proposal shows 445 parking spaces, which include 100 supplemental spaces above the minimum parking requirements, which could be administratively reduced as the project goes to construction. The project also includes 220 bicycle parking spaces. The portions of the North Plaza, which are on the subject site, along with the new, when the centralized garage and loading access was removed, a new central plaza between the 2 towers was added. In addition, the project is improving from an approved LEED Silver project to a LEED Gold project. The applicant has, I think, discussed most of the ground floor uses, but just to be certain, on each of the eastern corners of the towers is retail elements. The residential entries are located mid-block along Potomac Avenue. And then on the rear of the site, there are 2-level residential units which have ground floor access to the plaza. The parking is located off of 29th. Loading for the North Tower is off of 29th, and loading for the South Tower is off of 33rd. The applicant mentioned this, and I'll go through it rather quickly, but the project is recommending a 6-foot minimum clear sidewalk along Potomac Avenue with a 5-foot planting strip and a buffer, 1-foot buffer to the curb. This is generally consistent with the Potomac Yard design guidelines. However, the clear area has been reduced by a foot to provide additional planting area. We support this proposed change as the clear area is only shrunk at the pinch points of the building columns. Those building columns allow the retail entries to be recessed, keeping door swings out of the clear path. And then as you move south along the project, the space opens up for pedestrian area as you go south and through the mid-block. And then as you approach 33rd, it once again pinches down to that 6-foot minimum clear along the south building wall at the corner. Another element that was really studied in this process and goes beyond the design guidelines is the streetscape along 33rd Street. The approved design guidelines recommend a 9.5 foot streetscape there, which left a 6 foot clear sidewalk and a 3.5 foot planting area. The project significantly improves on this. It does have a slight jog as the building corner here is maintaining that 9.5 feet, but this represents a good location for that, and the landscaping has been modified to maintain that 8 feet of clear, while increasing the amount of landscaping as you go east on 33rd, increasing the biophilic nature of the streetscape here. On 29th Street, we once again have an 8 foot minimum clear here. This is consistent with the PDSP, and with the addition of the garage and loading access here, on-street parking couldn't be provided, so additional planting area is provided here, where the street is slightly narrowed. Within the last year, Arlington County has implemented and constructed new striping along Potomac Avenue, significantly putting a road diet on Potomac Avenue. The road has been modified to have a single travel lane in each direction, parking on both sides. This adds parking to the east side of the street, which wasn't there previously. In addition, on the east side of the street is a protected northbound bicycle lane. On the west side of the street, there is a buffered southbound bike lane, along with a protected sidewalk area that was provided, as there's no sidewalk currently along this project. This is a significant improvement over the on-street bike lanes that was previously striped. However, recently in discussions with Alexandria, other stakeholders in Crystal City, and comments that came up through the SPRC process for the project, staff has identified that the ideal solution for Potomac Avenue currently is to have a two-way protected cycle track or multi-use trail on the east side of the street that connects facilities between jurisdictions. And then once again provides a single travel lane in each direction with a left turn lane in the middle and parking on both sides. This could be achieved in as little as a 63-foot section. The Potomac Avenue is a 74-foot section. This, however, can't be achieved today because of the raised planted medians, which are in Potomac Avenue. And as the applicant mentioned, they have agreed to remove the median along their segment to help the county facilitate future improvements along Potomac Avenue and deliver this substantial improvement to the bicycle network. Additional transportation elements of the project including the removal of the median, include signal improvements at 33rd Street to signalize the crossing for pedestrians across Potomac Avenue, add new handicap ramps and crosswalks across Potomac Avenue at both 33rd and 29th Street. We've worked with the applicant to add an additional set of handicap ramps and crossings just off-site of the project to the west to provide a crossing of 33rd between the Center Park and this project area. The project is also going to construct temporary off-site walkways along 29th and 33rd Street. On 33rd Street, that walkway will be lit. This will help support pedestrian connectivity to the transit station along 33rd. The project also will make annual contributions to the Potomac Yard Transportation Management Association, as well as an almost $50,000 contribution toward transit station construction, which was envisioned in the original 2000 PDSP and has been delivered by the county with the construction of the Transitway and associated stops. This project went through about 6 months of public engagement on this, including an initial online public engagement in early December. The first SPRC for the project was held virtually in February, the second in March, and today we are having commission meetings at the end of May and early June for a county board hearing this month, for a county board hearing in June. Staff recommends approval of all items per the county manager's recommendation in the staff report. Those recommendations are highlighted here. Thank you, and Bridget, I'll turn it back to you for any public comment possible.
Mr. Chair, I turn it over to you.
I take it that means no one has signed up to comment on this item.
Nobody has signed up.
Alrighty, great. I want to jump straight to Commissioner Buck. He was our Site Plan Review Committee member on this particular project for kind of a summary of what's changed through site plan review and any remaining issues that might be outstanding from a transportation perspective.
Yeah, I will. I'll try and keep it brief, and I'll spoil the ending and say I'm probably going to recommend voting in favor with perhaps some minor suggestions for what we put in the board transmittal letter. The first was the loading dock placement. The original proposal had a loading dock along Potomac Avenue. There were concerns about pedestrian safety, breaking up the streetscape, and traffic impacts on Potomac Avenue. They moved that to 33rd, positive development. Mr. Gibson noted the temporary walkways along 33rd to enable these residents, assuming that the western portion of this site doesn't go under development as well, to get to the Metroway stop. That was addressed. Concerns about sidewalk pinch points, I think, have largely been addressed. Parking was an issue that I'll probably ask some more questions about, but it sounds like staff has come to sort of a compromise solution that I think is reasonable. I thought the parking ratio was a little high, but wasn't exactly sure where to sort of find guidance on what an appropriate parking ratio could be for a building like this that lies equidistant between two metro stations, lies along a bus route that unfortunately doesn't run often enough, has a regional trail going by. I found that Buzzard Point in DC was a pretty good comparison for that. It's roughly the same distance to the downtown central business district, same distance to Metro, similar amenities. Most of those buildings, the average of 3 that I found, were building out with a parking ratio of 0.67. It appears that staff, and hopefully they can clarify this, it seems as though the applicant is saying they are still requesting the 0.88 ratio. Staff is saying that they are basically permitting down to 0.7, which I saw in the draft board resolution, in hopes that if the applicant can ensure that the building is still marketable at that rate, that they'll basically be entitled to build at the 0.7 ratio. That 0.7 is close enough for me, and with a little more clarity on just what the arrangement is there, it sounds like an acceptable compromise situation to me. 33rd Street cross section, based on there is no planning guidance for any bicycle facility in 33rd Street. I had submitted it to the Crystal City Bike Network as a consideration. It's one of the sort of finite crossings signalized of Route 1, and I think would warrant a bicycle facility. Traffic volume forecasts are extremely low. There's also the linear park. People will naturally be sort of crossing at that mid-block with an uncontrolled crossing. Mr. Gibson during SPRC said they had concerns about truck movements backing into that loading dock, but at some future date they probably would evaluate some sort of lane reduction there, and that is good enough for me. They also noted in the memo that they are going to have some sort of a mid-block crosswalk there that will get designed in later site plan drawings. I think that's an important crosswalk. It's not reflected in plans now, and I just perhaps in our board letter I would stress that we want to ensure that is a safely designed crossing, owing to its value sort of in the linear park system. And finally, the bike lane situation, the long-term, the median removal and long-term alignment was kind of a happy surprise to come up with in SPRC. I'm fully on board with it, recognizing it's going to take a capital project of some sort to remove the remainder of the medians, do the signal work, do the restriping and everything that's necessary to enable whatever that final design looks like. I did want to suggest that assuming that this building delivers ahead of an eventual capital project for Potomac Avenue, that we in our board letter consider directing a final iteration of designs to deliver a quick build, materials only, paint posts, precast concrete, southbound protected lane, since the median will come out and when the project delivers, to simply have an interim condition delivered where the southbound bike lane is against the project curb in a protected configuration inside of the parking, noting that it takes a few years for a capital project to deliver, and to ensure that there is sort of an enhanced state that's delivered at a low cost, no curb changes or anything. That would be my one enhancement. And finally, it came up in discussions in this SPRC, as it has in a couple of others that lie along the Transitway. We still have this sort of elephant in the room where we are relying on the Transitway to provide non-motorized travel for residents who will be moving to our community. But right now we have, we are running 3 buses an hour at most, and we don't seem to have a plan forward to mitigate that. And I think it's a worst case scenario for our community, for all of us, from a transportation perspective, if we are simultaneously pressuring a developer to deliver less parking, sending them out to market this building, and having to tell prospective tenants or buyers that they have a Metroway adjacent to their building that sends a bus every 20 minutes. That's a condition. Perhaps it's just impossible to solve within the development sphere, but it's definitely a concern. I believe that was about it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Commissioner Buck. That was very thorough. Commissioner Raddick, your hand is up.
Thank you. I just had a comment on the bike. So I agree with Commissioner Buck on the temporary southbound lane. I think that's important. But my comment also goes to the bike lanes, the more permanent solution, which it seems like putting it on the, was it the westbound or the eastbound that was the permanent solution, staff?
The permanent solution is a 2-way cycle track on the eastern side of the road. It's where we have seen a substantial amount of, if you go out there today, you look at the landscaping between that and the rail fence. There's a well-worn trail there, and we also, in conversations with Alexandria, anticipate that their facilities would also be on the east side of the street. So we would want to connect in with those.
I was wondering, because right now between South Glebe and East Glebe and Alexandria, yeah, it jumps to the west side. So I was just curious if it was going to eventually, with Potomac Yard redeveloping in Alexandria, if it was also going to jump to the west side. So thank you. That's all.
Yeah, can confirm the ultimate plan in Alexandria when Potomac Yard fully builds out is for the trail to continue on that east side of Potomac Avenue. I've got a couple of questions, I think mostly for staff and not for the applicant. My first question is, can you explain why we can't do this two-way east side protected bike lane on Potomac Avenue now? Why do the medians have to come out?
So we potentially could do it if the parking was sacrificed in a really temporary case. There are also signal challenges, particularly at the Glebe Road intersection, that could require a more substantial capital project to address. The volume issues that our TE&O staff have looked at for doing this, and they've considered just this option that you're asking about. They just can't get the traffic going northbound through the Glebe Road intersection without having two lanes go through, and then that causes some challenges with this lane width, and then also the medians that are on Land Bay D. But I think this is an area where staff wants to deliver this, and we want to find ways to improve these services. This is in part exhibited by the work that was recently implemented to improve Potomac Avenue, but we are looking for ways to continue to improve those facilities.
Great, thanks. And then I think my next question is about this interim condition, right? When this project delivers, but this future capital project has not. We didn't get a ton of design plans in our briefing packet, but we did get enough to see a design here for Potomac Avenue that has a painted median, not the old raised median, and it appears to show kind of a non-protected but slightly buffered bike lane in the southbound direction. Can you speak to why that particular design was chosen? There appears to be enough buffer there that it could be, just swapped with the parking and be a protected bike lane in this interim condition.
I think that is certainly an opportunity that could occur without changing that much. I would have to defer to our operations staff on their desire to have one block of southbound protected bike lane in a nearly quarter-mile sort of system here along Potomac Avenue.
All right, great. Commissioner Buck, is your hand back up or still up?
That is a remnant.
All right, great. Any other commissioner questions? Go ahead and get those hands up. Otherwise, I'm just going to ask, can either the applicant or staff speak to what the projected traffic volumes are on 33rd Street? I too kind of tripped on that 4-lane cross section there on a street that I've certainly never associated with a high volume of traffic, and one that people will have to cross to enjoy the linear park.
Mr. Gibson, if you have it, please announce it. Otherwise, Grady, go ahead and pull it up if you can, please.
Yep, so we have a projected peak hour throughput on 33rd of about 400 trips in the AM peak hour and 350 or so during the PM peak hour. That would give a resulting ADT of about 3,500 vehicles per day.
Yeah, I appreciated Commissioner Buck's sum up, but Mr. Gibson, can you talk at all about staff's feelings about this 4-lane cross section on 33rd Street going forward, considering, even if you multiplied that peak hour of 400 an hour for 12 hours of the day, you're still only at like 4,800 trips. That seems way lower traffic than I associate with a 4-lane road.
I agree. I think that in this process, the site plan process, we felt that because Land Bay D had been built out There's some work still to be done with Land-Based C West, not knowing where or what that's going to be. This would be an incredibly easy road diet to restripe and take advantage of. And so rather than trying to plan this for a future date, it would be, this is more likely something that our operations staff would address relatively easily at a future date when we see Potomac Yard and both sides of Land-Based C built out.
Great. Yeah, I hope staff will consider doing that or consider incorporating that. I'm not 100% clear. If Land-Based C West comes through, is the applicant's expectation that it would continue the existing office approval on the west side or come in with a new site plan amendment?
So there are two different owners now for Land-Based C East and West, and the county has identified to the owner of Land-Based C West that given these changes, they would likely be required to come back in, regardless of the land use, to do a site plan amendment. And so we can't speak to the use at this time. They have continued to say that they are planning on an office development. This is owned by Lidl, so it potentially is headquarters type facilities for them. And so fingers crossed it can happen sooner than later.
All right, well, if it does, I hope staff will consider the possibility of maybe doing that 33rd Street road diet as part of that development. So all those office workers can more easily walk across to the linear park on the other side of 33rd. All right, not seeing any other hands. Does somebody want to make a motion on this one?
I will. I'll go ahead and move that we approve the application as recommended by staff.
Great. Is there a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion or movements to amend this motion? I would like to move an amendment. I would like to move that we state that the County Transportation Commission furthermore recommends that staff and the applicant work to provide a protected southbound bike lane along the project's frontage on Potomac Avenue as an interim condition until the county can do a capital project to implement its final vision for bike facilities on Potomac Avenue.
Second that.
All right, that amendment has been seconded. Is there any discussion of the amendment? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of amending the motion, I will go down one by one. Commissioner Bros.
Yeah, aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Yes, aye. Sorry.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Fessework.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And I also vote aye, and I believe Commissioner Mradovic is not here. He let me know he was not feeling well. So that's unanimous. Is there any discussion on the motion as it has just been amended? So basically, the county manager's recommendation plus our further direction on Potomac Avenue bike facilities. All right, hearing no conversation, we will move to a vote on the motion as amended. Let me just label it here. Commissioner Bros.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Fessework. Commissioner Fessework, I think you were muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much to the applicant for a speedy but thorough presentation, and for Mr. Gibson for answering our many questions. And I would like I believe the commission will take a brief 5-minute break before the next commission item is called. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
and I'm ready whenever you are to call the next item.
Okay, and my timer is going off. Okay, we are back in session. And the next agenda item actually is the US DOT RAISE grant application with Richard Roisman, excuse me.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me. Better late than never, right? Last month, we came to you with information about potential options for RAISE grant, where we were looking at two different projects. One, the Ballston Metro Rail West Entrance, and two, the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail, and received verbal concurrence to proceed with further investigation of the feasibility and which of those made sense to pursue, or both for a RAISE application. Having completed that, we are now coming back with a request for action on the county manager's recommendation in the draft staff report that you should have received in your packet. And that is all I have. I do not have a formal presentation for this evening. That recommendation is to approve the transmittal of an application to US DOT for the fiscal 21 RAISE program for $15 million in federal funding for the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail, and then to approve a resolution of support to be included with the application. Briefly, we did look at both projects as potential RAISE applications. Mr. Malouf, in his presentation about TAP and revenue sharing, mentioned the challenges associated with accepting federal money on a project. And ultimately, we determined that Ballston West Entrance was not a good move to take for a RAISE application. Federalizing that project, which is currently undergoing an update of its 35% design plans, would result in both delayed project delivery and increased project costs. In addition, Ballston West Entrance is well positioned to compete for other external funding sources, such as NVTA Regional, Virginia DRPT Major Capital Funding, and NVTC Commuter Choice Program funds. So then we looked at the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail, and we think it will compete well on the RAISE primary selection criteria of safety, environmental sustainability, and economic competitiveness. There's a little bit of a brief description about the project itself in the staff report. The total project cost in the county manager's proposed CIP is $25 million. It is the construction, I don't believe, is fully completed in the 3 years of the CIP, but we have information going beyond that, and the cost is $25 million. So we're applying for $15 million in federal funding. It's an 80% federal share for RAISE grants. We will basically be matching that, and then overmatching the remaining funding on the project will be local funds through the Transportation Capital Fund, the two components of which Ms. Crawford described in her presentation on the CIP. The award schedule for RAISE grants is this fall, and then funds must be obligated by September 30th of 2024. That schedule fits in with the schedule that's in the manager's proposed CIP, and we would be ready to obligate those funds and move forward through the rest of design and construction to complete the project. With that, let me stop for questions. And again, this is an action item. We are seeking Transportation Commission action on the county manager's recommendation contained in the draft staff report.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Roisman. That was a fantastic presentation. I don't have any questions. It answered everything that was in my mind. I am just kind of watching my participants' view here to see if I see any hands from other commissioners. Seeing none, I will just go ahead and move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the County Board approve the transmittal of an application to the U.S. DOT for fiscal year 2021 RAISE program for $15 million in federal funding for the Arlington National Cemetery Wall Trail, and that the Transportation Commission recommend that the Board approve the resolution of support for the RAISE program application, which is attachment A in our draft board reports.
Second.
That's been seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion?
very enthusiastic about that Arlington Cemetery activity.
That's a killer. Hearing no further discussion, I will move to a vote. This is Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck is abstaining. Commissioner Fessework.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slatt also votes aye. That is unanimous with one abstention. Mr. Reisman, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have 2001 South Clark Street, which you all did hear last month and approved, but we needed to re-advertise. So Linda Collier is back tonight to discuss that item.
Good evening. I'm Linda Collier. This is the same item that was before the board. This involves the site plan for 2001 South Clark Street, which was approved by the board last month, but we needed to re-advertise for the vacations, and it's a vacation of 2 street and utilities easements for South Clark Street. I can go into more detail if you'd like, but you already approved it once. So since there's a packed agenda, I will be short here.
Can you speak briefly to what was wrong or what changed that requires the re-advertisement?
Well, actually, it was failed to advertise the first time, so we had to. It was really not a re-advertisement, but an advertisement.
Gotcha. It just wasn't posted for the public hearing. Okay.
Yes. So because of that, we had to bring it back.
All righty. Let me just look. I see no other raised hands for questions, so I will simply move that the Transportation Commission recommends that the board approve the attached ordinance to a vacation to vacate and authorize the Real Estate Bureau Chief, DES, or his designee to execute on behalf of the board the deeds of vacation, and furthermore find that the Transportation Commission finds that the vacation listed in our draft board report are substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan, specifically the Master Transportation Plan of Arlington County, Virginia.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, then we will move to a vote. This is Clark vacations. Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Fessework.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slatt also votes aye. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, Ms. Collier.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have 1901 North Moore Street, the RCA building, and this is also here for action. We have the site plan with Dennis Sellen, Christine Walentish, and the applicant. And part 2 of that is another vacation related to the RCA building with Linda Collier. And if the applicant can go first.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Good evening. My name is Andrew Painter. I am a zoning attorney with the law firm of Walsh, Colucci and Courthouse. Joining me this evening today is Matt Anderson from Jefferson Apartment Group, John Ludostansky from Bowman Consulting. They are the civil engineers on the project. Jeff Lawson from Shalom Baranis Associates. They are the architects on the project. And Dan Van Pelt from Garove Slade Associates, and they are the transportation engineers on the project. We are excited to provide an overview of the redevelopment of 1901 North Moore Street, which most of us know as the RCA building. It's a 13-story building that was constructed back in 1969. And I think we all know where it is, especially as we walk or bike or drive across the Key Bridge. It's very prominent as you enter the Commonwealth of Virginia and Arlington County. It's a site that is in a very unique and highly visible location related to the Potomac, related to the northern entry into Rosslyn. And it also means that there is a lot of design responsibility and design opportunity with it. And so when we step back and we're thinking about designing the site, we really had to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be in an exciting urban realm? What does it mean to complete out the planning and redevelopment of what I think is a magnificent gateway into Virginia? As shown here, it's a very narrow site. It is surrounded on 4 sides by public streets. To the north, you have Lee Highway and Gateway Park to the north, very proximate to this site. On the south side is 19th Street North and the Central Place Apartments. To the east is North Lynn Street, which is a one-way northbound road, and the Waterview Condominium and Hotel. And to the west, we have North Moore Street, Rosslyn Gateway, and a pedestrian bridge over North Moore Street. What is being proposed is a 4.1 site plan, a rezoning, and a vacation of approximately 16,425 square feet of county-owned right-of-way and easements. And in place of the RCA building, we would seek to redevelop that with a residential tower with ground floor retail. It would be 27 stories in height, approximately 423 units, approximately 12,000 square feet of ground floor retail. The height is in line with the Rosslyn Sector Plan's recommendations of 260 feet to the top of the main roof, and then 272 feet to the top of the mechanical penthouse, which is less than what is permitted under the CO Rosslyn zoning district. In terms of density, we are in line with the Sector Plan's recommendations for a 10.0 FAR. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Lawson, who is pitching in tonight. He's filling in for Shalom Baranis, the founder of Shalom Baranis Associates. But I'd like for Jeff to just sort of talk through how his firm approached the design of the site, and then we'll turn it over to Dan Van Pelt with Grove Slade to spend the majority of our presentation walking through the transportation aspects of the project. So Jeff, if you want to spend a couple minutes talking about how you approached the design of the building.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. As you can see, the orange line at the center of your screen, it is highlighting our site that currently has the RCA building. And a unique feature of our site is that it's really an edge. To the south, you have the rest of the buildings of downtown Rosslyn, and to the north, you have Gateway Park, the Key Bridge, the Potomac River, and views to Georgetown. And we are right at the apex of where you cross the bridge, and it's really the first thing you see when you enter the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is a skyline view from Georgetown looking across the Potomac River. And as you can see, of all the buildings that are proposed for the Rosslyn skyline, we're actually one of the shortest at 260 feet. The Center Place Tower behind us is at 388 feet. Rosslyn Plaza will be close to 390 feet. So compared to these other buildings, we are quite small. The Rosslyn sector plan would have allowed for a single building that was 320 feet long. So one thing that we wanted to do is to pull this building apart into 2 wings and connect it with a sky bridge. And what this allows is what we call for a sky window in the middle of the block that allows sun and light and air to pass through the middle of the site. Here you have an aerial view of the building, and you can see that the south wing of the building has a pool deck on the roof. The north wing of the building has a viewing terrace, and the mechanical penthouse branches between the 2 buildings. By having 2 wings of the building, we've created more corners, which allows for greater views over the Key Bridge, over the Potomac River into Georgetown. One thing that we've tried to accomplish with this building is to have an outdoor space that's related to each of the public amenities of the building. On the upper left, you can see on level 8, where we have a water catchment system that creates a rain garden with a grove of birch trees. And then on level 6, we have a series of cloistered outdoor spaces that use natural materials. We have stone, wood, planting materials, and water to connect the inhabitant back to the natural world. This is our ground floor plan. North is to the left. We have retail on all 4 corners. The main entrance is mid-block and North Lynn Street to the east. And on the west side of the building, we have a loading dock mid-block. We have 2 parking entrances, 1 ramp going up and 1 ramp going down. And we have a bike showroom, which is a stand-in for a retail storefront. And we have a series of pocket parks. We have a bench with trees and other elements along Lee Highway, and then a very similar type of arrangement, but in a smaller footprint midway between our two parking ramps. This is an elevation of the west side of the building looking through the sky window, and you can see the loading dock entrance, the parking ramps going up and down, and you can also see that we have retail on both corners, again, the bike showroom and a small pocket park. This is a view from the corner of 19th Street North and North Moore Street looking north. Bicycle parking. We have 24 bicycle parking spaces within our bike showroom on the ground floor. We have 68 bicycle parking spaces on the B1 level of our parking garage and 92 spaces on the B2 level of the parking garage, which are all accessed through the parking garage ramp from the street. We also have a separate facility for retail employees with lockers and bike parking. For vehicular parking, we have 2 levels of below grade parking and 2 levels of above grade parking. 2 levels of above grade parking are roughly 1/3 of the spaces, and the below grade parking are 2/3 of the spaces. Our parking ratio is at 0.617, and 16% of those spaces are compact, and 15% of those are semi-compact, meaning they're only narrow in a single dimension. And lastly, here is a rendering of the building looking from Key Bridge, and you can see that the south wing of the building has a dark brick. The north wing of the building has a light metal, and the two work off of each other in a symbiotic relationship, and you can see Gateway Park in front of the site where trees seem to walk up and land within our sky window. Now I'd like to turn it over to Greg Van Pelt, who is our transportation consultant with Grove Slade. And that's Dan Van Pelt, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Jeff. Good evening. Yeah, Dan Van Pelt with Grove Slade. Nice to see you, Chairman Slatt, members of the commission. I'm going to talk through the rest of the transportation aspects of the project. So we'll start with the site plan. Just to make sure everybody's oriented, Lee Highway Route 29 on the North Moore Street on the west, Lynn on the east, and 19th Street on the south. And then we'll walk through and take a look at each of those sections of the surrounding streets. So next slide, please. So let's start with Lee Highway on the north. So it's the eastbound lanes that are abut the site. So the proposed section has 3 travel lanes in the eastbound direction, adding a new 6-foot bike lane with a buffer, 2-foot buffer. Then there'll be 24 feet, as I think many of you are probably familiar with the site. There are the existing frontage roads that wrap along the Lee Highway and the Lynn side. The frontage road on the north side goes away. There'll be 24 feet of from curb to face of building and an 18-foot clear sidewalk. Next slide, please. So we'll move around to the North Moore side of the site. Really not a significant change curb to curb width here. There's a travel lane in each direction. On the west side, there's a wider curb lane that's used by bus traffic. And then adjacent to the site will be an 8-foot parking lane, 18 feet from the curb to the building face on this side of the site. So let's go around. I think the next slide is North Lynn. And so what we're proposing on this side is, what will happen is that, so the frontage road on the North Lynn side will be closed. We'll have a minimum of 18.5 feet from the curb to the face of the building, but it varies a bit, but it's 21.5, but minimum of 18.5. We'll set the new curb line. There'll be a parking lane. There'll be 4 travel lanes. And what we're proposing as an interim condition is a buffered bike lane on the east side of Lynn. And so what that would look like is there's an image at the lower right hand of the screen that shows the precast buffers and then a bike lane. That's an image taken from 4th Street in DC. And so really what that does is set the street up for the future implementation of the recommendations of the Rosslyn transportation study for the further enhancements on the east side of Lynn. But in the interim, at least we're providing this northbound buffered bike lane on Lynn Street. So let's go to the last adjacent street, which is 19th Street on the south side of the site. We'll have 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction. One of those travel lanes, which is the westbound left turn lane, is a little bit wider, 11 feet, to accommodate the buses that need to turn onto more to get down to the metro station and the transit facility. But what we're including here is buffered bike lanes, 5-foot bike lanes on each side. This is a bit of a tight section, so there's been a lot of study of this. But we're able to accommodate the 5-foot bike lanes with a 2-foot buffer. I think John Lewis Gansey is here with us this evening. He can talk through if you have any questions about the sections. He's here to help answer those questions. So let's go on to the next slide, which is the transportation study itself and talking about the transportation review. This slide is really just, it talks about the overview of the site. I think we all know it's well located. There's a wealth of transportation opportunities here, given the Rosslyn metro station, the bus stops, the bike ped network. There's a pretty robust network and a lot of improvements coming. We'll talk through each one of those in a little bit more detail. Jeff touched on the parking, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. I think one thing that's important to point out with this site is it was for many years an office building, and the conversion from office to residential actually is helpful when it comes to vehicular trip impacts. So when you look at the numbers, it's all, we'll talk about those on a coming slide that's coming up, but it's actually about the same, slightly less. And we're also going to have a transportation management plan, so we'll touch on that. Next slide. So talking about the pedestrian facilities first, we do have a well-connected pedestrian network. We are very close to the Rosslyn metro station. It's just down the street, 1/10 of a mile. We have 13 bus routes that come through this area that you can easily walk to. In our review, most of the sidewalks near the site met the county's sidewalk width and accessibility standards. We're going to be enhancing and improving some of those at the corners of the site. And I think one of the things that's really important about this project is the closure of the frontage road that wraps around the project. It's really a remnant of past ways we thought about transportation and mobility, and so that goes away, and we're going to greatly enhance by pulling the building out to the street and enhance the public realm. It gets a walk score of 90, walker's paradise, and pretty much means that just about anything that you need to do, you could do on foot from this site. Next slide, please. So speaking of transit facilities, there's 15 bus stops over the quarter mile. We have 15 bus routes, Metrobus, DC Circulator, ART, Loudoun County Commuter, OmniRide, and I think we forgot to even put intercity bus on this. We also have those options here in Rosslyn. Metro Rail, Metro Station is blue, orange, and silver line service. Next. The bicycle facilities, so there's quite a number of facilities in the neighborhood, and quite a number are actually planned and improvements in the works. Bike lanes on Lynn, bike lanes on Wilson, Clarendon, on Nash. We have 3 capital bike share stations. One is actually in the existing frontage road on Lynn. That's going to be relocated to the other side of Lynn to be adjacent to the new bike facility. They'll be on the east side of Lynn. But we have the three capital bike share stations. There are planned improvements, Custis Trail, for the Roosevelt Bridge and the Iwo Jima Memorial Roadway, future plans for multi-use trail over 66, upgraded Freedom Park, and then the installation of the protected bike lanes on Fort Myer, Lynn, Nash, and upgrades for the bike lanes on Wilson and Clarendon Boulevard. Next slide. So I think Jeff really touched on the bike parking, so I don't know that we need to talk about that too much more. And I just mentioned the Capital Bike Share Station will move to the other side of Lynn Street. It's a 30 dock station. The vehicular parking, a ratio is 0.615. I think, Jeff, you had a slightly different number, but it's very close to that number. That's our ratio. I think it is higher than what the off-street parking guidelines for multifamily residential would say you could do at a site like this, but I think that it's what we believe is appropriate given the market. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, we have some of the comparable sites, and you look at the parking ratios that those projects provide on the right-hand side, we're lower than those. So I think we're moving in a direction that I think is the future of lower parking ratios, but still at a place where JAG feels pretty confident here that this is what the market would require. I think the other thing that's important to point out too is that those above grade, and Jeff, I don't remember if you touched on this in your presentation, but those above grade parking spaces have been designed in a way that if that parking isn't necessary in the future, it can be converted to occupiable square footage. So that thought has already gone into the planning of this project. Next slide. So the multimodal transportation assessment was performed. We scoped it with county staff before we began our study. There's 10 intersections. I also included the site driveways. You can see those on the image to the right. And as I've discussed already, the redevelopment really generates slightly lower number of vehicular trips. It's probably a little difficult to read, but on the bottom of the slide, you can see that there. So really, there were no mitigations that were triggered by the capacity analysis, the vehicular capacity analysis. So we really believe that the project impacts can be mitigated through the implementation of the enhanced site design elements that are being proposed and the improvements that have been identified as we worked through this, through the process with staff and through the SPRC process and through the implementation of the transportation management plan. Next slide. So this slide summarizes the overall transportation improvements. I'm not going to go through and read them all, but you can see them listed on the slide, but it will include upgrades to, I think some of the major ones are upgrades to the intersections of 19th and Lynn and 19th and Moore. We're going to bring those signals and the pedestrian accommodations all up to county standard. And then things like the protected bike lanes on 9th Street and the new facility on Lynn Street, I think are important ones to point out, and a bike lane on Lee Highway. And I think last, transportation management plan, that's the next slide. So this is, the TMP has been constructed in a way that we think is going to really help maximize, take advantage of the multitude of transportation options afforded this site. And so here are the major elements of the TMP plan, and I'd be happy to discuss any of that with you further. And with that, I think I'll conclude my part of the presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Sellon, do you also have a presentation on this?
Yes, I do. And I would like to share my screen if I may. Is my presentation up?
Sure is.
Okay, great. So this is an action item for a site plan amendment for what is still known as the RCA building at 1901 North Moore Street, the block bounded by Route 29 or Lee Highway, North Lynn Street, 19th Street North, and North Moore Street in the Rosslyn neighborhood of Arlington, Virginia. The site's existing zoning is CO mixed use and S3A public district. The applicant is proposing to rezone the site to CO Rosslyn, mixed use Rosslyn district. The proposed rezoning is consistent with guidance in the Rosslyn sector plan for this site and is consistent with zoning districts that currently surround the site. The Glob designation, general land use plan designation, is office, apartment, hotel, high. This Glob designation prescribes residential densities up to a maximum of 4.8 FAR and corresponds with CO Rosslyn zoning district, among others. The site is also located within Glob Note 15, which is the Rosslyn Coordinated Redevelopment District, which was established in 2015 to provide for new policies and tools to achieve the goals of the Rosslyn Sector Plan. There is no change in the Glob designation for this site plan amendment. A brief overview of the project. The applicant is proposing to rezone, as I said, to demolish the existing office building and to construct a 27-story residential building, ground floor retail, with a both above and below grade parking garage. The proposed density is 10.0 FAR with 452,000 square feet of residential FAR, GFA, and 12,130 square feet of retail GFA. The applicant is proposing a total of 280 parking spaces with a parking ratio of about 0.615 to be located in both an underground and as well as 2 levels of above grade parking that will be adequately screened from view. As part of the redevelopment, the applicant will be removing the internal loop roads as they have described that are currently on the site, as well as an existing skywalk over North Moore Street that connects the RCA building to the Rosslyn Gateway site directly to the west. The applicant will also be providing several other community benefits, including an open space contribution toward Gateway Park, provision of 12 on-site committed affordable housing units, LEED Gold green building certification, as well as other sustainability commitments, a public art fund contribution, and several transportation and streetscape improvements surrounding the site, including, as the applicant has well described, the buffered bike lanes in both directions of 19th Street North, the protected bike lane northbound on North Lynn Street, and the buffered bike lanes and the curb lane of eastbound Lee Highway or Route 29. There are 5 proposed zoning modifications as part of the site plan ordinance. There is an additional density request of approximately 218,000 square feet. This is in exchange for site plan infrastructure improvements and amenities, which include LEED certification, offsite improvements, provision of affordable housing, and contributions toward open space and public art improvements, which staff is supporting. There's a change in loading. There are fewer loading bays and at a lower height from 18 feet to 14 feet, which is also supported, as well as the applicant's proposal to, there is a perceived flexibility of this loading spaces within the garage, as well as the applicant's proposal to self-manage the loading and the operations. The parking ratios are supported by the county's residential parking guidelines, and the increases in the compact ratios can be justified by the applicant's proposal to use convertible floor plates and the fact that approximately half of the compact spaces are larger than compact in at least one dimension. The setback change is supported by the sector plan, and staff supports the request for 11,500 square feet in density exclusions because these areas, the areas of the density exclusions do not contribute to the visible bulk, mass, or height of the building. With respect to the planning guidance, there's 4 planning documents that have guided our review of this project. And in each case, we're fortunate to have recently issued ongoing or updated documents. And rather than describe each document individually, I'm just going to, as we do in the report, go street by street and describe which guidance we are given for each of the 4 streets or roadways that bound this site. For Route 29, the sector plan illustrates, and the bicycle plan update of the MTP clearly states that eastbound Lee Highway shall be marked with a bicycle lane from North Veach Street all the way to North Lynn Street, a portion of which directly fronts this site. This project will deliver a buffered bicycle lane, which will connect to a short network of already approved bicycle lanes on Lee Highway going as far west as North Nash Street, and from this location eastward connecting onto the Esplanade and the Custis and Mount Vernon trails. As a benefit of the yet to be completed Lee Highway Planning Study, Arlington County has received a grant from the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission for $710,000 to convert one travel lane of Lee Highway between North Veach and North Lynn Street in the predominant commuting direction, which would be eastbound in the morning and westbound in the evening, into an exclusive bus lane. And that should be noted that the 2018 scope and charge statement of the planning study states that the redesign Lee Highway into a complete street that better serves all modes of travel while recognizing its continued role as a commuter corridor. Strive to achieve a multimodal corridor that encourages bus ridership through land use recommendations and transit-oriented urban design principles, improve walkways and overall pedestrian and bicycle connectivity throughout the study area. Moving counterclockwise onto North Moore Street, the Rosslyn sector plan references the gradual elimination of the skywalk system in Rosslyn on page 44 and supports the continued dismantling of that system, including the particular segment connecting this project site to the building across North Moore Street to the west. The sector plan also shows a recommended street section for North Moore Street, which I am showing here in this graphic. One of the transportation goals for the sector plan is to reorient North Moore Street, the building access of North Moore Street, to a primarily pedestrian focus by enhancing the street's pedestrian character, adding storefront retail and lobby entrances, and improving its connectivity to Gateway Park, the Central Place Plaza, and the emerging 18th Street corridor. The core of Rosslyn's study identifies a project for multimodal enhancements to North Moore Street for the early 2020s. As already has been stated, this project will be removing the Sky Bridge. This project also includes a small I guess we could call it a transit project that includes red bus only asphalt treatment and striping for the bus lay-by area where the DC circulator and guts buses currently lay by at the southern end of this block of North Moore Street. At the southern end of this site, at 19th Street North, page 69 of the Rosslyn sector plan shows a map of the illustrative concept plan with a bicycle facility for 19th Street North between Arlington Ridge Road and Fort Myer Drive, which continues west as 19th Street becomes North Nash Street. Additionally, parts of the core of Rosslyn's study make a case for bike lanes on several segments of 19th Street North. There's a project identified for bike lanes between Arlington Ridge Road and North Lynn Street, which is just east of this site, for the late 2020s. Further, overlapping this project site and the Rosslyn Gateway site, there is identified a developer-led project for bike lanes between North Lynn Street and Fort Myer Drive. And that is identified for the mid to late 2020s, depending upon the timing of development. And as Dan identified in his presentation, this project will deliver buffered bike lanes in both the east and west directions of 19th Street North. And we conclude with North Lynn Street. Under the Rosslyn sector plan's goals, it states in goal T3, North Lynn Street should be transformed into a place bringing the community and the region together around retail, arts, welcoming public spaces, and expanded transit and walking connections, including two-way traffic conversion, contingent upon adequate feasibility studies, monitoring, and mitigation of any potential adverse impacts. However, in the core of Rosslyn's study, which was concluded 4 years later than the Rosslyn sector plan, the recommendation for North Lynn Street to remain one way at this time until at least 2030 with off-peak on-street parking. The county will continue to study two-way operations for North Lynn Street post 2030. The recommendation is also for a protected bike lane on North Lynn Street between Wilson Boulevard and eastbound Route 29, with tactical implementation in the early part of this decade and a full build out in the middle part of the 2020s. The protected bike lane project is also identified in the 2019 update to the bicycle element of the Master Transportation Plan, which is identified as Project 3-34. And as Dan also stated in his presentation, this project, the site plan project, is delivering that protected bike lane in the easternmost lane of North Lynn Street as a sidewalk level protected bike lane. I want to move now to the additional action item that you are going to be asked to act upon this evening, and those are the proposed street vacations. There are street vacations required as part of this project, and those include portions of 20th Street North, North Lynn Street, North Moore Street, and it's my understanding that there are also several easements that are also to be vacated as part of this project. Those street vacations essentially allow the elimination of the loop roads surrounding the site and essentially the creation and the consolidation of this block into a more buildable site for this project. And there are two exhibits for those vacations. This is the first, and this is the second. I have with me my colleague, Linda Collier from the Real Estate Bureau, should you have any questions about these street vacations. And now we come to the actions, which are spelled out here in all of their verbiage. I am going to give you a succinct description that you are asked to adopt the ordinance to rezone the site plan properties from CO and S3A to the CO Rosslyn zoning district. That is number one. And number two, you are asked to adopt the ordinance to approve an amendment to Site Plan 66 to allow the construction of the 27-story, 423-unit residential building with the modifications to the zoning ordinance as described herein. And number three, to find that the ordinance to vacate portions of the various streets and easements is in accord with the MTP. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Selwyn. Ms. Obakoya, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
Okie dokie. I'll just kick things off real quick, as I was our SPRC rep for this particular development. From a transportation standpoint, we talked a lot about 19th Street and what, if any, bike facility should be there. There are none there today. Originally was proposed standard bike lanes. The Core of Rosslyn study started out during the beginnings of the study with protected bike lanes on 19th Street and kind of walked those back over time until it didn't show much in the way of bike facilities there, just trying to keep vehicular traffic moving, but did have a strong statement that if more right-of-way could be acquired through redevelopment, that bike facilities were certainly very useful and appropriate there. And as you can see in this presentation, we've gotten to the point where there are protected bike, at least buffered bike lanes proposed in both directions on 19th Street. We have had a fair amount of conversation about parking ratio and whether 0.615 was higher than appropriate for directly above, for so close to a metro station. I think I, prefer a lower parking ratio, but I'm comfortable where we've ended up at 0.615. I think that's my main summarization of SPRC. There is certainly a lot of great things from a transportation perspective in this project. Huge streetscape improvements, elimination of the loop roads, finally getting rid of the counterproductive skywalks. and a lot of some offsite transportation benefits as well. So it's looking really great. If you have questions on this development, other commissioners, please put your hand up. Otherwise, I will jump into a couple of quick clarifying questions. My first one is trying to get a little more clarity about Lynn Street. So my understanding is the county's plan since the Corps of Rosslyn study has been an early tactical implementation of a protected bike lane on Lynn, and then an eventual capital project to permanentize Lynn. And there are multiple mentions in the staff report, one that seems to indicate that the project will deliver the interim, the sort of tactical thing, and then also listed under community benefit is money for design and construction. So can somebody just clarify, is it both? Is it doing the tactical implementation as part of the development construction and also contributing money towards design and construction of the capital project, or is it like just one or the other? If somebody could just clarify that, that would be great.
I think I'm probably in the best position to clarify, and probably some of the confusion is that we have not yet determined what the role of the applicant in the county is yet. I know we're at a late stage, but sometimes these do go to the 11th hour. And the question is whether the county is going to build this or whether the applicant's going to build this. So we are still in negotiations about whether there's going to be a cash contribution or whether the applicant is going to build this. So I think that's some of the confusion that you are hearing, Commissioner Slatt, is because that has not yet been finally determined. However, it is our expectation that what does get delivered through this project, whether it is via the cash contribution or via the construction, is that we believe that there would be sufficient funds to build out the vision for the protected bike lane, the final vision for the protected bike lane beyond the interim.
Great, thank you. We have a request in the chat, Mr. Sullivan, if you could stop sharing your screen for now. We're getting this very disconcerting picture-in-picture, teams-in-teams recursive view that's kind of messing with folks for now. So thank you for that. I think my next question is for the applicant. I saw multiple references to a bike showroom. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that is and how it's different than a standard bike room or a standard bike parking room?
Jeff, do you want to take the lead on that?
Sure. The idea of the bike showroom is that it really looks like a storefront, almost like a bike repair shop. So there are some bicycles that will be visible from the sidewalk, and then there will be some decoration and some probably frosted glass with some pictures of bicycles in the window or something. Does that help?
And just to elaborate on that too, Mr. Chairman, I think the purpose in doing this was really to make the bicycle parking accessible and visible to passersby, that they didn't have to always go into the parking garage in order to access bicycle parking.
Sounds great. Visual interest on the street and convenience. I like both of those things. I'm seeing a hand from Commissioner Lantelmi, so let's jump to him.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you raised about the bike showroom. I think it's a great idea. Overall, I think this project has come along tremendously well over the past as it's evolved. But the question I have, and this did not come up at SBRC and just came up as I was in the neighborhood, there are way more personally owned electric bikes. I see more and more every day of all types of varieties. The bike showroom, the bike storage, will that have outlets that people can recharge their electric bikes? Because I can only see that as a growing proportion of the bicycles that people will be storing. And this has not come up. You may not even have thought of it, but I think we really need to be thinking of this going forward. I'll go offline now.
Sure. Hi, Jim. This is Matt with JAG. So we actually hadn't thought about providing outlets for electric bikes. It's not something that's really been on our radar, but I appreciate you raising the point, and it's something that we'll think about going forward. Again, we want to be able to meet meet the demands and the desires of our residents. So thank you.
Commissioner Buck, why don't you go ahead next?
Sure. There's a lot to like about this project. The bike showroom sounds similar to a residential project in my neighborhood at 18th and Eads, which has a similar, what you describe. It's sort of a glass storefront like treatment that basically leads into a bike room, and it certainly accessibility wise and giving sort of prominence to the bike parking. It's fantastic. I love it as an amenity. I like the sky bridge architecturally. I'm not a design person, but I think it's almost like a nod to Rosslyn heritage. I think that's kind of a cool feature. But that was all a prelude. It was a trap to talk about parking. I'd love to talk about maybe we could talk about the progression perhaps of how this site plan evolved, because I'm really feeling like this is my strike three of Rosslyn developments. We reviewed the Marriott site, had a high parking ratio, but it was adaptive. It was across two highways. Our second one, Ames Center, marginally lower, but they basically said that they could refit the above ground parking, reduced it during the process, and almost admitted that they were essentially floor area banking because they were maxing out their FAR and were simply just building out above ground parking. Your presentation, frankly, it made the case for me why the parking is too high. It is such a highly accessible site, and it's such a prominent site where the first thing that people coming into Rosslyn are going to see is a building with two above ground stories of parking. I don't know what to do with this one. We're coming off a meeting where a month ago we approved what has become almost a de facto standard in South Arlington, which is a 0.3 or thereabouts ratio. I don't understand what the market conditions are here in Rosslyn that are leading us to gradually and incrementally inch our way down, but we still are saying there's something about Rosslyn that 61% of these building residents are going to need a car 400 feet from Metro. I just can't get past it this time.
Sure. So I guess maybe address the aesthetic question first. That's probably the easier one to talk through. I mean, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind just sort of describing the garage screening for us, I think that would help.
Oh, well, I think the first thing is the geometry of the garage. It's a little bit counterintuitive by having something that's extremely repetitive and continues around the whole building. It allows the building to read as a whole so that you're not focused just on those two floors. Then the screens, the parking garage screens are metal meshes, decorative meshes with a metallic finish that should be quite interesting. And it will also be very interesting when it lights up at night, because the light from the outside, from the inside, will kind of make the whole thing light up like a lantern.
So, I mean, I think it's aesthetically we can address having two levels of above grade parking, and I guess the other reason why we can't push those below grade is, because of geotechnical issues. We are right on top of bedrock and right above the edge of the WMATA zone of influence. So blasting through the rock is not an option, and hammering through the rock is just not economically viable to get everything below grade. And from a demand standpoint, so Jefferson Apartment Group actually owns and operates 2 other buildings in Arlington. One at 2009 14th Street North and Courthouse, also proximate to Metro, as well as a project that we just delivered in Ballston at 4000 Fairfax Drive. So both concrete high-rise buildings. The Courthouse one has about a 1-to-1 residential parking ratio. Today, it's the parking occupancy is at 97%. The only reason it's not at 100% is usually just due to resident turnover, people moving in and out of the building. And at 4000 Fairfax, we're still currently in lease up, about 52% occupied, but 95% of the residents that have moved into the building have also leased parking spaces. And so from our perspective, we're still seeing a lot of demand for parking in the RV corridor. And, you know, I forgot to mention it, at 4000 Fairfax, we're parked at a 0.8 ratio there. So at the current trend, it doesn't look like we're going to meet the demand there. That said, because of the location of 1901 North Moore in Rosslyn and how proximate it is to Metro, we're comfortable going down to a 0.61 ratio now. But at the same time, we've also designed our above grade parking floor plates in such a way that they are convertible if the market proves in the future that we don't need all of that parking. We can convert it to another use, you know, through a minor site plan amendment. So, you know, we're comfortable going down to a 0.61 right now, but we're not comfortable going below that at this point in time.
And Matt, just to glom onto this, and Chairman Slatt, you might remember this too, but there was we've had to sort of thread a needle between the residents of the North Rosslyn Civic Association that have actually, some of which have expressed an interest in having more parking. And then also those in the North Highland Civic Association, which want less parking, even though, you know, we're not in their civic association. We also compared this, did we not, Dan, to other recently approved similar projects in Rosslyn, and I believe we are the lowest of the recently approved projects in Rosslyn at a parking ratio of 0.61.
Yeah, we're lower than those recent approvals, and that was one of the things it was on the parking slide in our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Price, you're up next.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to start, you know, I always like to start on something positive. Something really positive. The aesthetics, the design of this building are magnificent. I think that skyway, that bridge over the top that lets, and then the center middle allows the light to come through. I think the building is a perfect vision as a gateway to Arlington County. It's magnificent. So kudos to you all for great design. Initially, I read some of the SBRC comments. Of course, my chairman, I read his comments. I read a bunch of them, and I was about to come at. I was getting all my blood pressure all worked up about the parking situation and also the bike lanes on 19th Street. Then, of course, Mr. Chairman, you helped me dial down with your comments just before. You helped me dial down that my blood pressure, so that made me feel a little bit better. Then, of course, Commissioner Buck just ratcheted back up the pressure again. So I'm kind of unknown about it. I don't understand. I agree. Why, in the core of Rosslyn, you are a block away from Metro, do you need that above ground parking? I don't understand. I don't understand it. Now I'm torn. And I just wanted to say that and wanted to verbalize it. So I'm really sorry. Again, you have a beautiful looking building. Your design work is magnificent. I just wish you'd reconsider and go with a lower ratio in terms of parking. Keep up the good work on the bike lanes because we need more of those.
All right, now question completely different. I think this one's for staff. My recollection is that the existing loop roads are used for slug lines, last I recalled. Is that correct? And is the county looking for other space in Rosslyn to relocate those slug lines, if that's true?
I guess that would be for me. I believe that you are correct, and we have probably an approaching dilemma because there are issues here and in other sites in Rosslyn with respect to slug lines, tour buses, long distance buses that are kind of gradually, everything's getting gradually pushed out as each site plan gets approved. And we don't really have, and especially for some of these informal things, like the tour buses and like the slug lines, that don't really have a home. We're working with, I'm not answering your question. We are working with Tripper, which is, you didn't ask this one, but Tripper is the long distance bus on North Moore Street that will be at least temporarily and possibly permanently relocated. We're looking for a new home for them. They go to New York on multiple times a day from North Moore Street. With respect to the slug lines, we're going to have to probably do another sort of ad hoc process, as we have been doing with the tour buses that we'll have to deal with the Holiday Inn project. Until we find a home for dealing with these projects on a longer term basis, I have spoken to, because I have been the sort of one consistent staff person in DES who's dealt with the Rosslyn projects, the Holiday Inn, the Marriott, and now this project. I did not do Ames. But these are all going to come sort of colliding together at a certain point in the not too distant future. And I have been sort of sounding the alarm. They don't currently have a home, meaning there is not a study underway and there's not a bureau that's assigned to them. I know where they should be assigned to, and I have been notifying that bureau. But I will raise this one more time because you're correct. This needs to be addressed. Thank you for raising it again.
All right, that is good to know. Slug lines, for anybody who may not be familiar, is a sort of an ad hoc spot where people who are driving in a direction that has dedicated HOV capacity pick up random people they don't know in order to get up to HOV capacity, and then they all get where they're going faster and emitting less CO2 and putting fewer cars on the road. So it is a bizarre and effective means of reducing single occupancy vehicle trips that happens to exist in Rosslyn and around the Pentagon and a few other places in Arlington. And we need to make sure we don't accidentally strangle it. Any other commissioner questions? All right, would any transportation commissioners like to have a go at making a motion?
Move to adopt the county staff recommendation regarding 1901 North Moore Street. Is that close? Close?
It'll do as a start if somebody wants to second that.
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right. I think in the interests of making sure that staff is happy and the Real Estate Bureau is happy with that, I would move to amend that motion to further state that the Transportation Commission finds that the vacations outlined in our draft board report are substantially in accord with the adopted comprehensive plan of Arlington County, specifically the Master Transportation Plan.
Thank you.
Is there a second for that amendment?
Seconded.
Is there a discussion of that amendment? Does anyone, I'm going to try and do this to short circuit because I think it's in the interest of time. Does anyone not vote in favor of that amendment? Okay, that's universal consent, so that amendment goes on to the main motion. Is there any discussion of the motion as amended, which is the county manager's recommendation, including the finding about the vacations? Commissioner Yeri.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. I am very in tune with the concerns Commissioner Price and Commissioner Buck raised with how this building is parked. However, I'm also very cognizant of the fact that this is providing a lot of new homes, it is providing a lot of new on-street infrastructure, and the applicants do appear to have built this within the bounds of the zoning ordinance as written. What I'm telling myself is it is maybe time to ask whether or not the off-street residential parking policy needs to be revisited to not just provide maximums in certain areas like this. For staff and the county board to actually direct to applicants to say, if you are building in a place like Rosslyn, if you are building almost directly on top of a metro station, these are the maximum number of parking spots you are allowed to build here. That's more where my brain is. It feels like more of a systemic issue than it does an issue with this project.
Yeah, Commissioner Yeri, I will say I 100% agree. I would hate to hold up this project or something like it based on parking ratio, given that they are well within the bounds that we have guided them from a county transportation planning guidance standpoint. If the commission is in agreement that we want to be seeing lower parking ratios this close to metro, I think we probably need to take some time this year and have some discussions and potentially let the board know that we think this is a policy that requires revisiting because we are not seeing the parking outcomes that we think will make Arlington a place that people are going to want to live going forward. Commissioner Price, your hand's up.
And it's also not lost on me that this development, two floors of above grade parking is convertible into potentially into residential or other potentially, I guess, commercial uses. And that's not lost on me. It's just after having to deal with the Marriott site, after having to deal with the Holiday Inn site was the one that took the cake. After having to deal with all of that, just, you're in such a great location and need so much parking. It's just absolutely, utterly ridiculous. But the applicant's building is fantastic, and all the amenities that come with it, I can't overlook.
Great, Commissioner Buck.
I know we're in discussion, but I guess I have a clarifying question. I assume that with these floor plates that are adaptable, again, like Ames, we're in a similar situation where if a conversion was someday undertaken to convert these 2 stories to something for people rather than cars, this would add to FAR, and I assume that the 10 FAR proposed is the statutory cap for this zone.
Matt, I can probably take that. Commissioner Buck, you're absolutely right. It would take a major site plan amendment, and we would have to work with staff on the density issue.
Commissioner Lantelmi, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this for the reasons Commissioner Yeri was saying. I also I support it in an Ames Center having convertible space, parking spaces above ground. Partly because it's a fact it will be there we need additional units. We need additional density here. The building is there, it's concrete, and laws can be changed. It's a lot easier to do that than to leave something empty. So I'm very happy with going ahead with this as is. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. That was a good conversation. Given Mr. Sellen's response on the slugging issue, I think I would like to offer another amendment here, just to give some additional visibility to this issue and make sure that the board is aware and that perhaps more staff are aware of the impending loss of this slugging space and the need to find a replacement. So I will make a motion to amend. I move that furthermore, the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board direct staff to initiate a process to find a new space in Rosslyn for the slugging activity that will be displaced by this development. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, second.
Here's a couple of seconds there. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Is there unanimous consent to that amendment, or is there anyone who would like to vote against it? All right, hearing none, that amendment passes. And so now the motion is amended is the county manager's recommendation, including the finding that the advertisements are substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan, specifically the MTP, and also this recommendation that the board direct staff to find a new home for slugging. Is there any more discussion of the motion as amended? All right, hearing none, we will move to a vote on the motion as amended. So this is 1901 North Moore. Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Buck, I think you may have been muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Fesselwork.
Aye.
And tell me.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slatt also votes aye. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much to the applicant and to Mr. Sellen for your presentations and your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the vacations related to RCA.
We passed those in the previous motion, so we can move on to the next thing.
Did I not hear that? Okay, cool.
That's what, yeah.
All right. So next we have performance parking with Stephen Krim. It's an information item.
Oh,
Good
it's
evening,
like old
everybody.
times. We got Mr. Krim here really late at night at the end of the agenda.
It's not 1:15. It's early. So, hey, you know who I am. I am here for an information item related to the performance parking project, which we last discussed sort of as a related or sideways related item for the residential permit parking review process in the winter of 2020-2021. First, thank you for making time on your agenda for this item. Since we've last spoken to you about this project, or the last time I presented to you, the county has signed a grant agreement with Vdot for the project, and we are in the process of writing an RFP for services to support that project. We're here this evening basically to get input from you all as commissioners to consider while finalizing our RFP. As a bit of background here, just in case you need a refresher, or actually for this evening, what I'm going to do is start with a refresher of this project and its goals, hear your priorities, and then lastly, I want to stress here that I am here to protect the public procurement process, which means that I will not be able to discuss certain topics that would be considered to give bidders any information that would give them a competitive advantage over other bidders. Though this is a public meeting, I want to be extra cautious and not do anything that would endanger our procurement. And as we all know, public procurement processes require some fair and open competition for all bidders that's really quite strict and unlike that in the private sector. So I'll go into a little bit more about what I'm not going to, unfortunately, be able to share with you this evening, but I still think this will be a productive for us in listening mode. So as a reminder of what this project is about, this is a project that is designed to first give people who park on the street more choices than they have today. To illustrate this, here's a map from the Penn Quarter Chinatown area of the district where performance parking is reality today. And as I've given, I think in the past, I use this hypothetical of two people who are going to the same restaurant that's marked by the blue pin here. Imagine that the person on the left is really pressed for time. They're running late for maybe an important date or some other obligation. And so they decide that it is worth it to them to be able to pay more to park in a location close to that restaurant. Meanwhile, there's another customer here who has some more time, is physically able to walk a little bit further, and would want to be able to pay less money to park in a less popular block or a block where there's less going on at that time than this person on the left would. So under the presentation, and I'm getting a note that my PowerPoint has gone missing, and I apologize for that. I will keep talking a little bit here, and just to say that the point of the project is to give people the choice about parking for different pricing at different prices depending on the popularity of the block that they are seeking to park at. As we know now, right now, it's basically all the same price no matter where. Marietta, would you do me a favor and bring this up? Because my ability to bring this back up is going to take a while.
Yes, 1 second, I'm on it.
Thank you.
Okay, is everyone able to see it?
Yes, I am. If you would please skip ahead to slide 3. In addition to giving people more choice, this obviously has the potential to better allocate or distribute parking demand across space so that those who would like the cheaper price can park where parking is not well utilized today. And for those high demand areas, somebody will have the ability to actually find a spot on them if they're willing to pay the greater fee or if that is worth it to them. The next slide, please. In addition to giving parkers choice, the project is also designed or envisioned to provide real-time information about where parking is and is not available so that the public is able to see their options. And part of this project will be to actually try out this data and see if it makes the travel experience more predictable and less frustrating. I'll also say that this information could be useful to county staff, Transportation Commission, and the board, because as we know, parking is really important to everybody, but we don't have as much data about parking as we do for other characteristics of the transportation system like traffic volume, speed, transit ridership, and so on. And so with this grant funded project, we'll be able to see how regularly updated comprehensive data about parking availability can benefit our transportation decision making as well. Next slide, please. So there are two major components to get us to this goal, as I've described at previous meetings. So the project will design, install, and operate or test hardware and software necessary to allow for differential pricing or performance parking pricing, and the information systems for the public on all of the metered streets in the county's metro corridors, which you see here in dark orange. We don't know yet what the hardware and software will be, how it will look, or how we'll make decisions about pricing. That's to be worked out through this process. And we will be engaging with the public, though specifics of that are not developed yet. As at the close of the project, the county will decide whether to make performance parking a permanent part of the meter program, given the experience that the county is able to have. Next slide, please. So as I've shared before, there are some measures of success that we already have in mind for this project. You know, we want to make it easier to find parking on high demand blocks. We want more people to choose to park on low demand blocks. We would like to see less double parking as a result of this. We hope that drivers will spend less time looking for parking and tell us that it is easier for them to park, because those are two different things sometimes. And we want people to feel that they are better informed about their parking options. Now, what I would like to prompt you with tonight, next slide, please, are these 4 prompting questions. And I hope that this quick summary has refreshed your memory about the basics of the project. But this is, at least some initial thoughts about what I'd like to hear you all speak on this evening. What are your measures of success? What audiences are important for us to target during engagement? As a related question, low-income groups or residents or customers or people visiting the county have been identified previously as people to consider when considering benefits and burdens, but are there other groups that we should be considering in that context? And a fourth and final one is we'd just like your thoughts on how to demonstrate that this project is meant to manage parking and not increase revenue, because that's, of course, a difficult message to sometimes get across. But, as I have always stated and always will, this is not about raising money. It's about better managing this public asset. So if you have any thoughts on how to make that case convincingly, we'd love to hear it. Next slide, please. So in the spirit of keeping the procurement fair, during discussion, I am not going to be able to share information that could be misunderstood as giving away information about what is in a draft RFP or what will be in the language or tasks to be described. We are here to listen to you. So I would encourage you, if you have a question about whether or not something is in what we're drafting, maybe just tell me that that's important to you, because we want to hear that. And that also keeps me from saying anything that might be misconstrued as inappropriate for public procurement. What we will, of course, do is after a contract is awarded, we will explain how and why points raised tonight were included or not included to close that loop. So with that, I will move us to discussion. And if you could just go back to the last slide, just to give everybody a quick reminder of, thank you, of the prompting questions that I had. We can certainly start with any of those or anything else that comes to mind.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Krim. As always, I'll go ahead and kick things off since I think about performance parking probably more than most people on the commission. So I think my measures of success really align with yours, with some of the examples that you put up from a thinking about improving the parking experience. So, things like parking availability, the percentage of blocks that have an open space on them, the amount of time spent looking for parking, and reductions in double parking, which would sort of improve, traffic flow or whatever. But I really hope that we can look at measures of success that matter to people who never set foot in a vehicle. My hope is really that this performance parking pilot is going to, reduce vehicle miles traveled, that people are going to spend less time circling the block looking for a parking space, less time circling the block, staring at the parking spaces instead of where they're going. And I really hope that we can measure that to be able to demonstrate to people who don't own a car, who walk and bike in these areas, that performance parking is helping them too. And, it's keeping them safe. There are fewer people driving around who could hit them, distracted looking at other parking, looking for parking instead of where they're going. From an engagement perspective, I can't reiterate enough about engaging with the business community. Every time an on-street parking change comes up, it's the business owners that we hear from more than anybody else in public comment at the commission. So that is absolutely critical. As far as demonstrating the project is meant to manage parking, not increasing revenue, I think the information that SF Park gathered as far as how did the overall amount of money that was collected change from before and after, and how did the price of parking change? Because in theory, the lowest, demand areas may and should go down in price rather than up. And it's important to show, that this program is not just about raising prices everywhere. It is about matching pricing to demand. So I think that data is critical in showing that. So those are my initial thoughts. I don't know if you want to respond to those or if you want me to just move to the next commissioner.
I am in listening mode, so please, anyone else?
Great. Commissioner Lantelmi.
This is brilliant. I'm so excited that you're moving ahead with this. Thank you, Mr. Krim. This is the type of stuff that came up, as you recall, when we were talking about the residential parking program and possibly adding meters in those areas. This is fantastic to move ahead with this. I concur with the chair about what would be measures for success. Another thing to help pitch it is if we see a reduction in the number of cars double parked in the bike lanes, which is a continuing problem. If there are fewer people double parked in those lanes, that would be good to track. I'd also like to see if there's some way we could figure out whether this would result in additional parking in the underutilized garages that are in these areas. That would show that if more cars are going into the garages, that would show that we're pricing it properly. So maybe there could be some sort of interface between this program and those garages. But otherwise, yes, go ahead. This is wonderful. I'm very excited to see once it gets awarded and we start collecting data, there'll probably be all sorts of wonderful reports and interesting things that we'll be able to discover by looking at that data. So all the data nerds are going to just go crazy. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck, you're up next.
All right. Commissioner Lantelmi took two of my suggestions, so kudos to him. He wins an hour of free parking. I'll just second his suggestion about maybe even just partnering with a small sample of garages in the performance parking area to just sort of get a snapshot of if their occupancy or even pricing changes as a result of being in the pilot program area. That would be useful information. And also the data nerds. I think the data nerds are super important here because just my information on performance, my involvement in it isn't as current, but it just the challenge I've observed is getting information to that driver and making it actionable so they can actually make that decision, make that behavior shift that you're talking about of, deviating 2 blocks over to a lower occupancy area rather than just sort of seeing an open spot in a high demand area, parking, going to the multimeter and seeing the quote unquote gotcha that it's X dollars an hour and they were not expecting that. So I guess I would just say in your RFP and your evaluation, I hope solutions to making that information actionable to the driver at the time, and also the data on the back end, working with Mobility Lab or whoever, Commissioner Slatt, to crunch the data and put it in RL now to identify, the sort of the bargain parking spots and performance parking to affect that sort of that shift, that dispersion across your area. I'd love to see that. And finally, a question: How are you dealing with ADA spots? Are they going to be dynamically priced, or will they remain static?
I cannot remember what I have shared about that publicly. I believe I may have before. Because that does impact scope, I am going to demur. But if you have a particular priority, or if you have a way that you would prefer we deal with those spaces, I would love to take that note down.
Commissioner Buck, did you want to follow up on that, or are you good?
Sorry. Sorry,
All
this computer is terrible. I don't know if I have a preference. I'm the principle of all may park, all must pay is a good one. I'm just worried about, because the project aim is sort of spatial dispersion of parking, and the point of ADA parking is for a spot that's proximate to a destination. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit concerned with including ADA spots in the dynamic pricing. And maybe the Disability Commission would be a better stakeholder to consult on that question. And totally respect your scope issue.
All right, Commissioner Yuri, you're up next.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for this, Mr. Krim. Just to build off what Commissioner Buck said about data, I'll go one step further, I think, and say that as a general good government principle, we should have a lot of visibility into not just the data being outputted, but also the heuristics driving the algorithms that are actually making the performance parking decisions. So that would be a very big measure, or a very important measure of success for me, is whether or not we actually have insight into the actual heuristics, algorithms, however you want to phrase it, that are actually making these performance parking decisions for us.
Commissioner Fessy-Work.
Thank you, Chairman Slate, for allowing me to ask this question. And Mr. Krim, I appreciate the presentation. I like the project. I also am on the same page with pretty much what all my previous colleagues were commenting. I guess my question is along the lines of the breakdown of this sort of dynamic pricing, on how that ties in with ADA as well as just other groups, including university students from like George Mason University, as well as Marymount, and also like for veterans. I guess it's just like, I guess the question that I would like to pitch off, just to think about, is just, how is this pricing going to really happen? I feel that component to this program can also play a hindrance to an extent, just because of how overly it could be complicated, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I just wanted to say. But overall, thank you.
Commissioner Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Krim, always a pleasure. Your last discussion you had with us about parking was just phenomenal, and I agreed wholeheartedly with it, and I appreciate this project. To take your questions on your prompting questions one by one, I agree with the other commissioners in terms of your measures of success. I can't state anything else that's already, I wouldn't state anything else that's already been stated, that you're good there. In terms of audiences to target, again, civic associations, community leaders, I mean, they're, to me, the top priority. They're always getting their buy-in in the areas that you're considering. Definitely the business community is highly important. In addition to low-income groups, I don't know if people consider tourism and tourists as a segmented group to consider. As someone who drives or will be driving this summer, I consider myself a tourist. If I'm going to come into a city, my first inclination is never to find parking that's in a parking garage. I'm always going to look, if I'm going to go to a city, I'm going to try to park on a street. It would be good that they were aware of their concerns would be taken into this kind of consideration. Not that we can consider all tourists, but I just thought that might be a group you want to consider. On your last point, advice on demonstrating this project is meant to manage parking, not increase revenue. I'm going to say I'm not against the increasing in revenue. I can't lie. I'm not going to lie on that topic. As someone who deals with the discussion about financing and funding transportation projects around this country, and the need for additional sources of money for transportation projects and transit, transit projects. Let's not say transportation. If money could be used from this project to go to benefit more transportation in the community, I would say absolutely I'd be in favor of that. Not to the general revenue, not to the general fund. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Mr. Krim, I did have a question pop in my head. I'm not sure if you can answer it with your scoping and whatnot right now, but in your presentation, when you were showing the areas that will be part of the pilot, it appears to include the entirety of the RB corridor and the entirety of the Route 1 corridor, which would seem to indicate that you won't have the ability to compare what happened in the pilot areas to what happened outside the pilot areas, because all of the areas outside the pilot will be of a very different sort of land use and character. Is that going to be the case? Are you not going to have sort of a control area of the county that's, you know, somewhat urban to compare results to over the course of the pilot?
So that's a good question. I can say that yes, the goal of the project is to deploy this and have this go live in all the metered spaces around the county, or I'm sorry, in those two metro corridors. But I hear your point about a control, and that's something that we will be sure to consider as we're writing the RFP. There's multiple ways in which controls can be created. I won't go further than that, but I think you bring up a good point. So we'll be sure to think about how an RFP, you know, could or could not incorporate that somehow, or maybe it's something for discussion further down the line once a team has been selected.
Thank you. Yeah, I just know it's often easy to discount results that compare, you know, say, you know, parking availability improved versus, you know, the previous year, you know, to say that, oh, well, that's because of other things. That's not because of your performance parking pilot. And it's much easier to say, no, it's because of the performance parking pilot if you had a control where you watched what happened during that same year, but without the changes. So thank you for taking that into possible advisement. Not seeing any other hands. Give everybody one last chance here to weigh in if they'd like to. All right, I don't see anybody. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation and the opportunity to weigh in this early in the process. It's greatly appreciated.
All right, thank you. We'll be back many times.
All righty, we saved the best for last. That would be me. Okay, so now we'll talk about parklets, and I'm actually joined by Kate Payne, who is in economic development. She'll be here to answer any questions you have about the business establishments related to parklets. I just want to say that you all know me as transportation planner, which is a role I'm acting in, but my primary role has been in the county as a design engineer for many years. So I started this project as a design engineer, so just a side note. But we are here to talk about an amendment to the county code for parklet installations. This will be a new program that we're asking for board adoption. And just to let you know what a parklet is, let me change my presentation. It looks like I'm not full screen. Okay, a parklet is essentially a place to sit, relax, stand about, and take in the scenery, look at the streetscape. It's within a parking space adjacent to the curb and the sidewalk, and they are fully accessible to the public, and they provide pedestrian clear paths. So there's always an opening that we're proposing at least 4 feet for accessibility. Like I said, they are installed in parking spaces, and they are semi-permanent installations. And what I mean by that is that they are bolted to the ground. They are secure when they're installed, but they are easily dismantled for emergency and maintenance. So that's why we're calling them semi-permanent installations. The objective of the program that we're requesting is to allow for these permanent public outdoor spaces within existing parking spaces. We want to promote sidewalk activity, activate the sidewalk a little bit more, allow for more open space within these areas, and increase opportunities for just hanging out in the public right of way. So first, we heard of parklets in 2015 with the Rosslyn sector plan. After that, the Streetscape Elements Plan, as part of the Rosslyn Sector Plan, was adopted, which included locations within Rosslyn where they wanted to see these parklets. And so what the board did was in 2017, they adopted the master plan with a 2-year pilot, basically asking staff to study parklets within the right-of-way for 2 years and then report back on what we found. And so that's what we intended to do, but we did not intend on a pandemic. So instead of rolling this out in 2020, we are now rolling it out in 2021. And with that adoption in 2017 from the board, Rosslyn then went out and designed their first parklet, worked with the consultant and the county quite heavily. We collaborated and came up with a set of design standards for Rosslyn to use, and they installed their first parklet prototype in 2018. And after the Rosslyn sector plan, the installation and the adoption, the public spaces master plan adopted in 2019, 2 things specific to parklets. They basically said that they wanted us to continue to allow the activation of these spaces, and they wanted us to create a process and guidelines for developing these parklets, which is exactly what we're doing now. So the Rosslyn Parklet is on North Oak Street at Wilson Boulevard. It is fully accessible and open to the public. The Rosslyn ambassadors, who are the people who go out and clean the area and canvass the area every day in Rosslyn, they inspect the parklets periodically and they clean them daily. And the parklet is totally maintained by the Rosslyn bid. So the guidelines that we're putting forth are part in what we saw with the Rosslyn Parklet and part what we learned from the Rosslyn Parklet as part of that experience, and then some other things that we see or saw in other places around the country and continue to see. So we do know that we want the parklet to be a minimum of 30 feet, which is about 2 parking spaces. And then with that, we have these buffer zones on each side of the parklet with wheel stops to allow for some space between the parklet and a potential parked car. And the parklet will be held entirely within those 2 parking spaces. And we've made it clear that we do not want direct commerce to occur within the parking space. But an individual, anyone can go to an establishment, purchase something, and then go to the parklet and sit and enjoy a meal or what have you. But we are not allowing for the direct sale of any goods, products, or food within the space itself. So with that, you can see these 7 areas that we want to highlight with the parklet. So the buffer is, the wheel stops are just upstream and downstream of the parklet. And then we have these vertical elements that help to make visibility easy for a driver. 3.5 feet is what we typically see for the height of a person who's looking over another object. So we want to make sure that these physical elements are 3.5 feet or less. The minimum width of the parklet will be the width of a parking lane, which is 7 feet, or if the lane happens to be a little bit less, then the parklet can be within that realm. So we are suggesting that the furniture be movable and that other elements of the parklet can be movable as well, except we did hear from some other people in commissions before coming here that suggested that we don't make them movable. So that's something I actually need to take back to staff to just talk about a little bit. And then we have these open guardrails, again, for visibility and to define the space. And I mentioned the 4-foot radius for turnaround for ADA accessibility. And then I have since added to this diagram and this illustration some wheel stops that run parallel to the curb on the outside perimeter of the parklet. As you can see, that's number 7. That was because I actually received some feedback on vehicles traveling adjacent to the parklet. So that's a new recommendation. So it's actually not in the presentation that I think is on the website because I just added it. So in this section of a parklet, one thing we did learn is that debris can, if the parklet does not allow for full access underneath, the debris can collect and it can be a problem. So we have these angle beams and pedestals and things like that that we require as part of the parklet installation. And not only does it keep it flush, but it allows for water to flow easily and it helps to keep the debris out. And that was one thing we did see probably in the first month or so with the parklets in Rosslyn. People were leaving trash and things like that. And there were some reports of rodents, but they cleaned it out. And those reports went away, and the ambassador said they never saw or heard of anything about it again. So that was a lesson learned, and it's something that we have incorporated into our maintenance and operation standards. And I already mentioned the railings being 3.5 feet or less. So for operations and maintenance, what you're looking at here in this illustration is the actual parklet in Rosslyn. It was under construction in the factory. This was before they packed it up and put it on the truck and shipped it here to Arlington. So this is what it looks like. And so one thing I want to note with that is that the applicant is fully responsible for the design, installation, maintenance, removal, and storage of the parklet at all times. It is clear through our application process that the parklet is subject to termination at any time and may be removed due to safety issues, permit violations, maintenance, or any other thing that we see that may be a problem for the public. So we make sure that condition is within the parklet application. And we are requesting annual renewal, and the parklets are all subject to periodic inspection. So for the petition and application process, Chairman Slatt, I did hear you say that the entity that you hear from the most are the businesses. We are requesting that 67% of the fronting block establishments be in support of the parklet, and that if the parklet is installed within a business improvement district, that they sign a letter acknowledging that the parklet will be installed in that location. And for the online application form, we are requesting that the applicant upload the petition. They provide us with the existing conditions showing us what's upstream, what's downstream, give us pictures, what signs are present, are meters at the location, is there any other public infrastructure in the built environment, what are they proposing for landscaping, what are the materials for the parklet, are they sustainable, things like that. And then we have a loading and framing plan that we want to be submitted as part of this process as well. And so based on that, we have staff review time that we want to recover as part of this process. So we have determined that the initial fee should be about $2,100, and that is for DES, environmental services, parks and recreation, and community planning and housing development, CPHD's review time. And then if the applicant comes back for renewal, there's a $500 renewal fee. And so we are acknowledging that the county will forego approximately $6,146 in annual parking meter revenue. And that number was determined based on the number of days that parking meters are in operation in the county, which was about $10,000. And then I applied the 61% occupancy rate for parking meters within the RB corridor, within the highly parked parking meter portions of the county. So it was about 61%. So I took that and reduced the amount to 6146. That's approximately what we will forego. And finally, for public engagement, we've been to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Disability Advisory Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission. We are now here with you tonight. And those are the public engagement portions, and we have next to go to the Planning Commission. We hope to request to advertise in June and go back to the board July 17th for action. And also we've installed a Parklet website where you can find out more information. You can look at the draft Parklet guidelines in detail and see everything else we have going on. There are wonderful pictures of parklets around the country and other things we're doing that related to parklets. So with that, I welcome any questions or comments you may have.
My audio and video cut out there for a bit, but seeing lots of hands up, so I'm just going to jump to them. Commissioner Lantelmi, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Slatt. Thank you, Ms. Obukoya, great presentation. And I've always noticed the parklet up in Rosslyn there, and it looks really good. I support it, and I think this is a great program. So I look forward to hearing it again at Planning Commission. So thank you. You have my support for it.
Thank you.
Can we stop sharing our screen because you get the weird screen thing going on again?
Yes, I certainly will. Thank you.
All right. Apparently my internet dropped there, but I am back. Commissioner Lantelmi, I see your hand up if you want to go ahead and jump in.
Already did. I'm already done.
Okay, great. I missed it. I hope it was scintillating. Commissioner Buck.
This is good. I like that it's explicitly for public space and couched as non-commercial. I like that you have taken a light touch, I think, to the engineering and the design is appropriately thought through in the right ways, while not demanding water-filled barriers or tremendous setbacks from adjacent parking. I think you've hit that balance really well. One note to consider is with the standard of design for the parklet being at the level that it is, I think what I think is going to happen, sort of by design, is these are going to pop up in bid areas almost exclusively, and areas that are not serviced by a bid are simply not going to have the organizational capacity to design, apply for, install, maintain one of these, and a second order evolution of the program might be to consider how the county might be able to support some of that activity around the design and the engineering and the permitting for non-bid areas, just in the interest of basically bringing a very nice public amenity to the entire county.
Okay, thank you. Kate, would you like to speak to that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you that through our POTOSA program that the county has, the publicly accessible temporary outdoor seating areas, that would allow for a temporary installation of a parklet. We have received applications for of private developers, having interest in sponsoring and maintaining a publicly accessible parklet, out front their property. So yes, you hit, that is totally correct, that we're likely to see these mostly in bid areas, but there could be interest from other parties as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Commissioner Brose, you want to jump in?
Yeah, it just follows on Commissioner Buck's question, really. Who would be the other applicants, really? I mean, it struck me, the bid makes sense, and maybe other private corporations, but these would be such nice opportunities in other neighborhoods where you might not have that. Well, I'm curious who else would be other than sort of the private corporation, or if you've thought about the the folks who would come up with the $2,100 basically to do that every year, so to speak.
Great. Yeah, I that was pretty much the same thing that jumped out at me. I think, and partly it's because parklets got their start in such a sort of, grassroots, ground up way, that it feels jarring to see, a $2,100 permit fee and $500 renewal on something that started sort of people clawing back public space from cars. I feel like we're not going to get any of that at that price point. We're going to get bids and we're going to get developers and maybe a particularly well capitalized business installing these. Even as a small business owner, $2,100 feels like a large cash outlay to bring a little extra public space, to the area near my business. So yeah, I would love to see the county explore in the future something like, scholarship program, for lack of a better word, right? Like we will fund personally up to 2 parklets, maybe bring the arts commission in to, do the judging or something, or the parks commission, what would make a great public space. Some small organization or some dude is going to have a really awesome idea for a parklet and a place to put it, and they're not going to have the money and they're not going to have the design chops, to have somebody build this thing. But I think the county would be a better place to live if we could support 1 or 2 of those a year on sort of a competitive basis. I think that would be really killer.
You bring up a good point. I'd like to respond to that if I can.
Please.
So other neighboring jurisdictions have much lower parklet application costs. For instance, in the District of Columbia, $50 is the annual fee. In Alexandria, it's $125, and from spring to Thanksgiving. And for Richmond, it's a $300 fee over 3 years. So we did find that in places near here, the cost was much lower. And we do understand that that is something that we have acknowledged in the board report as well. But we did want to also acknowledge that there is staff time that needs to be recovered for this, or the board can speak to that further. But that was the decision that we made in terms of the cost of the parklet.
Great, thank you. That's extremely useful context, and I 100% understand, like, these are not, there's a significant cost to the county to inspect them and approve them and look at them and all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have anything? My people section is like broken. Normally I would put down Commissioner Lantelmi's hand myself because I'm obsessive compulsive like that, and it won't let me do that. But I don't see anybody else's hand. Yeah. Nobody else. Okay, I think we are done. It's great to see you in another role, Ms. Obukoya.
Oh, it's a little interesting, but fun. So, thank you. All right, so with that, do we have any other business from the commission?
No, I will say a very wise transportation commissioner who has since left this particular call, probably because of the late hour, asked me if we were going to have a commission happy hour get together outside someplace soon, given that the weather has improved and we've all been trapped in our houses for the last 15 months. And I will say I think that's a fantastic idea, and I will see what I can do to put something like that together this summer. Does any other commissioners have anything from their liaisons they want to bring up or raise? I don't think I have any new site plans that need to be staffed out or anything like that. I see no hands other than Commissioner Lantelmi's that I've tried to put down 15 times today and haven't been able to. So
down on my end.
Mr. Chairman, are you asking for a second on the happy hour thing you want to schedule? Because I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's seconded. I'm just assuming,
all in favor.
all in favor at this point. Ms. Obukoya, do you know what our next meeting is?
Yes, it is July 1st. June 3rd was the original date for this meeting. July 1st is the next meeting, 7 p.m.
All right, fantastic. I will see you all then. Thank you all for giving up your evening. I will say for a 10 item agenda, I think we did a pretty good job, and also gave the board some good direction. So thank you all. Have a lovely remainder of your evening and remainder of your week, and I will see you in the future.
Bye-bye.
We are adjourned.